Tonight, I want you to notice how tired you may have become from trying to make something happen that you have already touched in imagination. Perhaps you have returned to the same scene many times. Perhaps you have spoken the same words inwardly. Perhaps you have tried to capture the right feeling, only to wake the next morning, look at the same circumstances, and wonder whether you must begin all over again. And because the evidence did not immediately satisfy you, you assumed the imaginal act had failed. You thought perhaps the feeling was not strong enough, the scene not vivid enough, the assumption not pure enough. But before you carry that burden any farther tonight, I want you to make one quiet decision. If you are willing to stop beginning again, write in the comments, "It is already working." Let those few words mark not another effort, but the end of unnecessary effort, for perhaps nothing is wrong with what you planted. Perhaps the only thing exhausting you is your habit of planting it again. Think carefully about this. A man plants a seed and covers it with earth. The next morning he sees no flower, so he digs it up and plants it again. By evening he becomes uncertain, removes it once more, examines it, turns it over in his hand, and asks whether life has entered it. Then he plants it again. The following day he repeats the same act. Would you call this faithfulness to the seed? No. You would call it interference. Yet many do exactly this in imagination. They imagine the end tonight. Tomorrow they search for evidence. When evidence does not appear in the manner they expected, they return to imagination, not from fulfillment, but from panic. They do not revisit the state because it feels natural. They revisit it because they fear they failed to create it. There is a great difference. One imagines from possession. The other imagines from anxiety about possession. One rests in the end. The other keeps rebuilding the end because he does not believe it can stand without his constant attention. Tonight I want you to be free of this. You are not here to begin again. You are here to become less contradictory to what you have already accepted. Perhaps you have already had one moment in which the desire felt real, only one. Perhaps it lasted 10 seconds. Perhaps it occurred weeks ago. Perhaps you were lying quietly and suddenly, without forcing anything, you felt the relief of completion. You felt what it would be like if the matter were settled. For one moment you were not asking. You were not hoping. You simply knew. Then the feeling passed. And because it passed, you assumed the creative act passed with it. But why should that be? When a letter is posted, you do not believe the letter ceases to exist merely because your hand is no longer holding the envelope. The act has been done. Something has been given a direction. Your task is not to stand at the post box all night wondering whether the letter is still inside. Let it travel. There are people who turn manifestation into an endless examination. Did I do it correctly? Should I imagine it again? Was the feeling strong enough? Did I fall asleep too quickly? Did I think one wrong thought afterward? Have I lost it? Listen to those questions. Every one of them contains the same hidden assumption. Something may be wrong. Something may have failed. Something may need repairing. And so, while saying you want fulfillment, you spend your attention assuming that fulfillment is fragile. Tonight, let it be less fragile. Let the assumption become something that does not collapse because you had a difficult afternoon. Let it survive an unwanted thought. Let it survive a moment of impatience. Let it survive the fact that the world has not yet presented you with the evidence you expected. A true state does not need to be protected from every passing mood. If you know your name, you do not lose it, because for 1 hour you forgot to think about it. If you know where you live, the house does not disappear because you spent the afternoon elsewhere. And when a new assumption begins to become natural, it acquires something of this same quiet stability. You do not have to hold it with clenched hands. You do not have to watch it every moment. You do not have to keep whispering, "Do not disappear." Perhaps the strongest thing you can do tonight is to stop treating your desire as though it is in danger. There is a peculiar exhaustion in always trying to create. People hear that imagination is creative, and then they imagine they must use imagination every waking moment as a tool. They turn inward and begin laboring there exactly as they once labored outside. More scenes, more words, more effort, more correction, more inspection. Soon imagination, which should be a place of freedom, becomes another workshop in which the lights are never turned off. Let the workshop close tonight. You have done enough for this hour. This is not laziness. It is not indifference. It is not abandoning the desire. It is recognizing that a seed does not need the farmer standing over it through the night. There comes a point after planting when the most intelligent action is to leave the soil undisturbed. That point may be now. Suppose the desire concerns love. You have imagined being loved. You have imagined being chosen. You have perhaps heard words inwardly that imply companionship, security, affection. Then tomorrow comes and someone is quiet. Immediately the old mind says, "It is not working," and back you go. Another scene, another affirmation, another attempt to convince yourself. But the silence of one afternoon does not cancel what you accepted inwardly. The danger is not silence. The danger is your decision to interpret silence as failure. Suppose the desire concerns money. You have imagined relief. You have felt, perhaps briefly, that you are supplied. Then an expense appears, and instantly you say, "I must strengthen the manifestation." Notice what has happened. You have allowed one expense to tell you who you are. You have allowed one piece of evidence to overrule the state. Tonight, do not fight the expense. Do not pretend it is not there. Simply refuse to make it your identity. The circumstance can exist without becoming the judge. Suppose it concerns work. You have imagined yourself established, appreciated, useful. Then a door appears not to open. You think the whole thing is lost. But perhaps nothing has been lost. Perhaps one door is simply one door. You do not need to turn every event into a report on the condition of your manifestation. Life is allowed to contain ordinary movements, delays, changes, conversations, unexpected turns. Not every one of them deserves interpretation. This alone can bring enormous peace. You do not need to read the world every hour like a newspaper written only about your desire. Let the world be. Let some events mean nothing. Let some silences mean nothing. Let some delays remain delays. You are not required to explain the bridge while standing upon it. And you are certainly not required to rebuild the destination every time the road bends. Tonight, I would have you become less interested in whether the manifestation is working, and more interested in whether you are still contradicting the state you once accepted. That is a much quieter question. You may not need another imaginal scene. You may only need to stop saying inwardly, "It is not happening." You may not need another affirmation. You may only need to stop rehearsing the conclusion that you have been forgotten. You may not need more intensity. You may only need less opposition. Do you see the difference? Strengthening is not always adding. Sometimes, strengthening is removing contradiction. If you place a weight upon one side of a scale, you need not keep adding more and more weight forever. If you stop piling weight on the other side, perhaps your desire has received enough imaginative attention. Perhaps the greater work now is simply not to spend the rest of the day arguing against it. Not perfectly. I do not ask perfection. A passing fear does not become a decree unless you make it your dwelling place. A moment of doubt does not destroy an assumption. You are allowed to be human, while a new state becomes natural. This matters because many people become frightened of their own minds after learning that imagination is creative. They begin watching every thought. They say, "I must not think that." Then they think it more. They become afraid of doubt, afraid of fear, afraid of disappointment. And now the inner life, instead of becoming free, becomes a prison guarded by the person himself. I do not teach you to fear your thoughts. I teach you to choose your state. Thoughts may pass through many rooms. The question is where you choose to sleep. Tonight, sleep in completion, not because you maintained perfect conviction all day, not because every reaction was ideal, not because the world gave you reassurance, simply because completion is the state you choose to occupy now. You do not need to drag every error of the day into bed for correction. Maybe you reacted. Fine. Maybe you checked. Fine. Maybe for an hour you were certain nothing was happening. Fine. The hour is over. You are here. You can return without punishment. And returning is not starting over. Remember that. Returning is not starting over. If you walk out of your house for an afternoon and come home at night, you do not say, I must build the house again. You enter. The house was there. Treat the state the same way. You may wander from it, then return. No drama, no confession, no desperate rebuilding. Come home. Perhaps you can feel how much gentler this makes the whole matter. No more spiritual bookkeeping. No more keeping count of good thoughts and bad thoughts. No more deciding whether today strengthened or weakened the desire. No more trying to discover whether some invisible score has gone up or down. Your state is not a fragile account that requires hourly balancing. It is a place you can occupy. Occupy it now. What would it feel like if you did not have to make the manifestation happen tonight? Not if you had to convince yourself it was done. Simply if you did not have to make it happen. There is relief in that. Let the relief be enough. Perhaps the desired thing is already familiar in imagination. Perhaps you have seen the scene so many times that it no longer excites you. Do not mistake this for failure. It may be becoming ordinary. And ordinary is closer to possession than excitement. The first time a man enters a home he has long desired, he may walk through every room in wonder. Months later, he enters, removes his coat, and thinks about supper. Which moment reveals deeper possession? The second. Naturalness is often quieter than desire. So if tonight your scene feels less dramatic, good. Do not force emotion back into it. Do not shake the seed to make sure it is alive. Let it become familiar. Perhaps you do not even need the scene anymore. Perhaps one quiet inner sentence is enough. It is settled. Or, that matter is taken care of. Or simply, thank you. Not said to produce an effect. Said because the inner matter is no longer open for debate. And if no sentence feels necessary, even better. Rest without words. You have spent enough time speaking to yourself about the desire. Let silence begin to imply possession. A man who has what he needs is not always talking about having it. Sometimes he sleeps. That is what I want for you tonight. Not more effort disguised as faith. Sleep. Not more striving disguised as persistence. Sleep. Not another attempt to make the invisible obey you. Sleep from the assumption that you have already given it direction. Perhaps the manifestation is stronger when you stop touching it. Perhaps the conviction deepens when you stop testing it. Perhaps the state becomes more natural when you stop announcing it every 5 minutes inside yourself. Let this possibility enter gently. There is nothing you need to prove before closing your eyes. You do not need to prove faith. You do not need to prove discipline. You do not need to prove that you understand the law. There are no marks given for staying awake longer. No prize for repeating more phrases. No reward for worrying more intensely about whether you are doing it correctly. You may stop now. You may let tonight become an interval in which the desire is not a problem to solve. How different that feels. The desire is not a problem. The delay is not a problem to solve tonight. The means are not a problem to solve tonight. The path is not a problem to solve tonight. And you are not a problem that needs fixing before manifestation can occur. You are simply learning to remain less contradictory to the end you chose. That is all. If the old mind says, but should I not do something? You are doing something. You are withdrawing attention from the assumption of failure. You are refusing to restart what does not need restarting. You are allowing what has been imagined to remain imagined without interrogation. This is a form of faith far quieter than effort. Perhaps tomorrow the mind will ask again. Has it happened? That is tomorrow. Tonight, no. Tonight the question can go unanswered. Was my scene vivid enough? No answer. Did I feel it strongly enough? No answer. Should I do it once more? No answer. Have I lost it? No answer. Let the questions exhaust themselves. They have survived because you keep feeding them replies. Let them speak into an empty room. You do not need to argue. You do not need to say, yes, it is working 100 times to silence one doubt. A doubt can simply be left without conversation. There is strength in that. A man who knows his destination does not stop at every mile to argue with a signpost. He keeps going. And sometimes keeping going means sleeping. So let the old urgency become quieter. Let the impulse to start again become quieter. Let the need to improve the scene become quieter. Let the desire itself become less demanding. You are not abandoning it. You are allowing it to belong to you without constant ceremony. Perhaps nothing is wrong with what you planted. Let that thought remain. Perhaps nothing is wrong. Perhaps the seed does not need another planting. Perhaps imagination already received your direction. Perhaps what is needed now is not another beginning, but the end of interruption. You are not here tonight to begin again. You are here to become less contradictory to what you have already accepted. Less contradictory, not perfect. Less contradictory, a little less checking, a little less questioning, a little less rebuilding, a little less fear that one thought has ruined everything. That is enough for tonight. Let the manifestation remain where you planted it. Let the soil close over it. Let darkness be darkness. A seed is not frightened by darkness. It begins there. And you do not have to see what occurs beneath the surface. You can rest. No new beginning is required. No repair is required. No final effort is required. You may simply return to the quiet sense that the matter has already been given its direction. And now, for a while, you can leave it alone. Consider the seed once more, but this time do not think of it as a symbol you have heard 100 times. Think of what actually happens when something is planted. The seed disappears. That is the first thing. It does not become more visible after planting. It becomes less visible. It goes out of sight. And this is precisely what troubles the impatient mind. Before planting, you could hold it in your hand. You could examine it. You could say, there it is. After planting, you must trust what you can no longer see. And many people find that unbearable. They say they believe in imagination, but what they truly trust is evidence. They trust what can be counted, what can be touched, what can be confirmed by another person, what can be pointed to. And so, after planting an assumption inwardly, they turn immediately to the outer world and ask it to reassure them. Show me something. Give me a sign. Let someone say something. Let some circumstance move. Let there be proof that what I did within was not foolish. But the outer world does not exist to soothe your impatience every hour. And if you require it to do so, you have not yet ceased depending upon appearances. The seed does not need to see the harvest. It does not wait beneath the soil each morning and ask whether the flower has appeared. It does not say, perhaps I have failed because the gardener cannot yet admire me. It simply remains where it was planted and proceeds according to its nature. You would not dig into the earth each morning and accuse the seed because you cannot yet see a flower. You know that would be absurd. Yet psychologically, this is exactly what many do. They plant an imaginal act at night. In the morning they dig. They look at the person. No change. They dig deeper. They look at the account. No change. They dig again. They listen to the conversation, not the words they hope to hear. They remove the seed from the soil entirely and say, you see, nothing is happening. Then they plant it again that evening. This is not persistence. It is mistrust wearing the clothes of persistence. And I would have you understand the difference. Persistence does not mean constant interference. Persistence means loyalty to the state. Interference means constant inspection of the evidence. One is inward, the other is outward. One says, I know where I have planted. The other says, I will not believe anything until the surface changes. Tonight, ask yourself a very quiet question. What would you stop checking if you trusted what you had already planted? Do not answer with philosophy. Answer honestly. What would you stop checking? Would you stop checking whether someone has changed their tone? Would you stop checking whether the money is closer? Would you stop checking whether an opportunity has appeared? Would you stop looking for some small indication that the world has begun to agree with you? Would you stop reviewing the same conversation to see if perhaps there was a hidden clue? Would you stop asking yourself how many days have passed? Would you stop measuring whether you feel sufficiently different? This is where the habit of checking becomes so subtle. You may no longer be checking the world. You may be checking yourself. Do I feel fulfilled enough? Do I feel natural enough? Do I believe strongly enough? Did I maintain the state today? That is still digging. The shovel has simply moved inward. You are still searching for proof that the seed is alive. Let the seed be alive without examination. This is difficult for the part of the mind that wants to control. Control believes that attention is protection. It believes that if you stop watching, something may go wrong. If you stop thinking about the desire, perhaps it will disappear. If you stop repeating the scene, perhaps it will weaken. If you stop asking for signs, perhaps you will miss the moment. But notice the assumption beneath all of this. The assumption is fragility. You are treating fulfillment as though it cannot survive without constant supervision. Would possession feel this way? If you truly owned the house, would you stand outside all night watching the windows to make sure it remained yours? If you were secure in love, would you inspect every sentence for evidence of affection? If you felt supplied, would every small expenditure become an inquiry into whether abundance still existed? No. Possession reduces surveillance. Lack increases it. That is why compulsive checking can be so revealing. It does not mean you have failed. It simply tells you where attention is still seeking confirmation from the outside. Do not condemn yourself for that. Just notice. Then stop one act of checking. Only one. Tonight, you do not need to stop every habit at once. Perhaps there is one thing you repeatedly inspect. One person. One account. One possibility. One imagined deadline. Leave it alone for the night. This is not a ritual. It is a statement of inner position. You are saying, in effect, I do not need another piece of evidence before I rest. That is a profound shift. Not dramatic, but profound. The seed remains beneath the earth whether you stare at the ground or not. Your staring does not nourish it. Your impatience does not accelerate it. Your suspicion does not make it safer. And your imagination does not become more creative because you examine the surface every hour. There is a stage in every inward acceptance when visible confirmation may be absent. I do not tell you that this absence proves a specific outcome is guaranteed in precisely the form you imagined. That would be another kind of superstition. I tell you something more useful. If you spend the absence constantly rehearsing absence, you strengthen the psychological state of not having. That is what matters tonight. The question is not whether every desire must unfold exactly according to your plan. The question is whether you are using the interval to become more loyal to fulfillment or more fascinated with lack. The interval is where identity reveals itself. A man says he has assumed prosperity, but during the interval he speaks inwardly only of shortage. A woman says she has assumed love, but during the interval she studies every silence as rejection. Someone says the matter is settled, but during the interval they count each day as evidence that it is not. The interval becomes the true practice, not because you must perform perfectly, but because this is where old habits attempt to reclaim authority. You see the unchanged surface and immediately return to the old conclusion. This is taking too long. Nothing is moving. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps I should try another method. And with each statement, you are not discovering a fact. You are selecting a state. Remember that. You are selecting a state. The surface may be unchanged, but the conclusion you draw from the surface is yours. You can say, nothing is happening, or you can say nothing at all. Silence is often wiser than interpretation. You do not always need a positive story. Sometimes you simply need to stop telling the negative one. This is one of the most useful distinctions I can give you. You do not have to turn every quiet period into an affirmation. You do not have to tell yourself, wonderful things are happening behind the scenes, if you do not genuinely feel that. You can simply refuse to turn quiet into failure. That is enough. The soil is quiet. You do not call it dead because it is quiet. Winter fields appear empty. Yet you do not conclude that the earth has forgotten how to produce. There are processes that do not announce themselves, and even in your own life, many important things happen before you are aware of them. A decision may be forming in another mind. An idea may be developing before it reaches your conscious attention. A circumstance may change through a chain you could not have predicted. Or perhaps the first movement is only within you. Perhaps you stop reacting the same way. Perhaps you stop waiting with the same desperation. Perhaps the desired thing begins to feel less foreign. That too is movement. But do not become obsessed with detecting even that. The mind can turn inner signs into another form of checking. Am I calmer today? Was I more detached? Did I forget about it for 3 hours? Does that mean it is near? You see how quickly the old habit changes costume. Let us make it simpler. No signs tonight. No measurement tonight. No diagnosis of the state. You planted. Rest. That is enough. Imagine a farmer who has sown a field. He does not sit beside each row and whisper encouragement to every seed until dawn. He does not count the minutes between planting and germination. He does not accuse one corner of the field because it looks like soil. Of course it looks like soil. The harvest has not yet become visible. There is dignity in knowing the difference between planting and harvesting. One is not the other, and the interval between them is not necessarily a problem. The impatient mind experiences every interval as danger. The settled mind allows intervals to exist. This is something you can practice tonight. Allow an interval between the imaginal act and the visible change, between desire and evidence, between assumption and circumstance. Let there be space. Do not rush to fill that space with doubt. Do not rush to fill it with forced optimism either. Just space. You may find that space strangely peaceful, because for once, you are not trying to manage the unseen. You are not demanding a report. You are not calling the soil to account. You are not asking the seed to explain itself. What would you stop checking if you trusted what you had already planted? Perhaps you would stop counting days. Time is one of the favorite instruments of doubt. It has been 3 days. It has been 2 weeks. It has been months. And then the number becomes evidence against you. But time itself says nothing. You give it meaning. A week is a week. A month is a month. The psychological suffering enters when you say, therefore something is wrong. You do not know that. You know only that time has passed. Do not turn the calendar into a judge. Perhaps you would stop checking other people. This is another subtle habit. You assume something inwardly, and then watch everyone involved. Are they warmer, colder, closer, farther? Did their expression mean something? Did their silence mean something? You become a detective of behavior. And all the while you say you are living from the end. A person living from the end is not necessarily blind to behavior, but they do not need every behavior to certify the state. Let people be human. Let them have moods. Let them be quiet. Let them surprise you. Let them move in ways you did not predict. You do not need to interpret every gesture. Perhaps you would stop checking money, not ignoring practical responsibilities. That is not what I mean. Attend to what must be attended to. Pay what must be paid. Make wise decisions. But after the practical act is complete, do not continue the account mentally all night. Do not turn arithmetic into identity. A figure is a figure. It does not get to tell you who you are. Perhaps you would stop checking your own emotional state. This may be the hardest. You wake and ask, do I still feel it? Why must you? The fulfillment of a desire does not require you to maintain one emotion continuously. You can be tired and still occupy a state of security. You can be sad and still belong. You can feel uncertainty about one event without becoming an uncertain person. Do not confuse emotional weather with identity. The seed does not require perfect weather every hour. Neither does a new state require a perfect mood every hour. Let yourself be less monitored. You may discover that your inner life becomes much quieter when you stop watching yourself so closely, and that quiet is valuable, because constant self-observation can become another form of separation. There is you. Then there is the version of you being watched. Am I doing it right? Am I in the state? Am I natural yet? It becomes exhausting. Tonight, stop standing over yourself with a clipboard. There is no examination, no score, no record to keep. No one is grading your sleep. You may simply lie here. This is where trust begins to feel practical. Trust is not dramatic belief in the impossible. Trust may be the decision not to check one more time. That is all. One more time. Not tonight. Perhaps the letter can remain unanswered until morning. Perhaps the account can remain where it is. Perhaps the person can remain silent. Perhaps the outer world can remain exactly as it appears for these hours, and you can still rest. That is power. Not controlling the appearance, not needing the appearance to change before you are allowed to stop watching it. The outer world has become, For many people, like a mirror they cannot stop examining. They change an inner assumption and immediately look at the reflection. Has the face changed yet? Then they look again, again, again. But a mirror has no creative authority. It reflects. Your task is not to hypnotize the mirror. Your task is not to persuade it. Your task is not to beg it to show you something new tonight. Turn away. Let the face change. Let the inner expression become natural. The mirror can do what mirrors do. You do not need to supervise it. There is freedom in turning away from evidence without denying evidence. I do not ask you to pretend the outer world says something it does not say. I ask you not to make it the final authority over your inner position. There is a difference. You can acknowledge, this has not changed yet, and still not add, therefore it never will. You can acknowledge, I do not know how this will unfold, and still not add, therefore it cannot. You can acknowledge, I feel uncertain tonight, and still not add, therefore I have lost the state. Do you see how much suffering lives in the second sentence? The first sentence is often fact. The second is interpretation. Drop the second sentence. That alone may leave enough room for sleep. The ground is dark. The seed is hidden. You do not know what is happening beneath the surface. You do not need to know. There is a kind of arrogance in thinking that what you cannot see is not occurring. Life is full of invisible beginnings. Roots grow where eyes cannot follow. A decision forms before it is spoken. A mood changes before the face reveals it. An idea gathers before words are found for it. So do not worship visibility. Visibility is only one stage. And do not worship invisibility either. Simply stop demanding that every stage report to you. The manifestation, as you call it, does not become psychologically stronger because you check it. It becomes less contradicted when you stop repeatedly rehearsing its absence. That is the key. Not magical surveillance, not forced faith, less contradiction. If you have imagined yourself loved, stop using every silence to rehearse being unloved. If you have imagined yourself supplied, stop using every expense to rehearse poverty. If you have imagined yourself established, stop using every delay to rehearse failure. If you have imagined yourself free, stop using every temporary restriction to rehearse captivity. You need not deny the event. Just stop turning the event into identity. The soil is not the flower, but neither is the soil evidence that no flower can come. It is simply the present surface. Let the surface be the surface, and let your inner position be chosen for reasons deeper than the surface. Tonight, perhaps you can imagine laying the shovel down. No more digging, no more turning over the earth, no more searching for a root, no more inspecting whether the seed has split. You do not need to see the first hidden movement. Let it be hidden. Let what is unseen remain unseen for now. You are going to sleep. That is enough. What would you stop checking if you trusted what you had already planted? Let one answer come, and then stop checking it. Do not turn even this question into another exercise. One answer. Enough. Perhaps it is the post, perhaps a person, perhaps money, perhaps a decision, perhaps yourself. Leave it alone, just for tonight. Let the world exist without giving you a report. Let the seed exist without giving you a flower. Let the assumption exist without forcing you to feel it every second. You do not need to see the harvest before you sleep. You do not need to know when it comes. You do not need to know what route life takes. You do not need to keep watch over the field. The field will still be there when you are no longer watching. And perhaps, for the first time in a long while, you can allow what has been planted to remain planted. No digging, no accusation, no demand. Only the quiet knowledge that not seeing is not the same thing as nothing existing. Let that be enough for this night. The seed does not need to see the harvest, and neither do you. There is another habit of the mind I want you to notice tonight, because it creates more suffering than the silence itself ever could. It is the habit of interpreting silence. The letter has not come. The conversation has not happened. The person has not spoken. The amount has not changed. The door has not opened. And immediately the mind begins to explain the silence. It is not working. They have forgotten me. Nothing is moving. This is taking too long. Perhaps I was wrong. But listen carefully. Silence has no meaning until you give it one. Silence is not rejection. Silence is not failure. Silence is not delay. Silence is not proof that your desire has been denied. Silence is simply the absence of information. And the mind, uncomfortable with not knowing, rushes to fill the empty space with a conclusion. Usually the old conclusion. That is what I want you to stop doing tonight. You do not need to turn the absence of news into bad news. You do not need to make an empty room speak against you. You do not need to hear no, where nothing has yet been said. Suppose you are waiting for a letter. Each day you look. Nothing. Then the mind says, if it were going to come, it would have come by now. Who told you that? The envelope did not say it. The postman did not say it. The world did not say it. You said it. You took silence and dressed it in disappointment. And once dressed, it felt like fact. This is how the old state keeps itself alive. It takes what is neutral and gives it familiar meaning. The person who feels rejected hears silence and says, of course. The person who feels overlooked hears silence and says, there it is again. The person who fears lack looks at an unchanged account and says, nothing ever changes for me. The event may be quiet. The interpretation is loud. Tonight, let the event remain quiet. Do not lend it your old voice. There are nights when nothing appears to be moving. Good. Let nothing appear to be moving. You are not required to produce motion before sleep. You are not required to receive confirmation before the lamp is turned out. You are not required to settle the whole matter before midnight. The outer world may remain exactly as it appears for these hours, and you can still rest. That is important. You can still rest. Perhaps you have made visible movement a condition for inner peace. If I hear from them, then I can sleep. If the money changes, then I can relax. If I receive the answer, then I can stop thinking. If something happens, then I can believe. You see the bargain. The world must move first. Only then will you allow yourself to move inwardly. But that is the old order. Tonight, reverse it. The world may be quiet. You can be quiet too. Not defeated, quiet. There is a great difference. Defeat says, nothing is happening, therefore I have lost. Quiet says, nothing is being reported to me right now. That is all. Do not add to it. Perhaps tomorrow brings news. Perhaps next week. Perhaps events take a form you did not expect. Perhaps something changes first within you. You do not know. And not knowing is not failure. Let that become natural. You do not know. Fine. The mind has been trained to believe that uncertainty is dangerous. It wants every blank space filled, every pause explained, every delay interpreted, every silence translated. But some silences are simply pauses in the visible story. You do not need to write the next sentence yourself. Let life write it. You have already given direction inwardly. Now you can stop narrating the absence. This is especially useful before sleep, because night magnifies whatever the mind has not finished. In the daytime, there are distractions, work, people, errands, movement. But when you lie down, what has been unresolved becomes louder. The unanswered letter feels more unanswered. The unspoken conversation feels more significant. The unchanged circumstance feels more fixed. And because the room is quiet, the mind imagines the whole world is quiet. Do not confuse the quiet of the room with the conclusion that nothing is happening. The room is quiet because it is night. Let night be night. You do not need to turn darkness into a verdict. There is a tendency in human beings to fear the interval between cause and effect. We are comfortable when we can see movement, a wheel turning, a door opening, a person approaching. But when nothing appears to move, imagination becomes impatient. It invents explanations, most of them unpleasant. Tonight, do not invent. Let the interval exist without interpretation. A week of quiet is a week of quiet, not a prophecy. A month without visible change is a month without visible change, not a sentence passed upon your future. A day without contact is a day without contact, not a definition of your worth. The facts are often smaller than the story you attach to them. Keep them small. The mind says, they did not write. Fine. Stop there. Do not continue with, because they no longer care. The mind says, the account looks the same. Fine. Stop there. Do not continue with, because nothing ever works for me. The mind says, I have not received the answer. Fine. Stop there. Do not continue with, because I must have failed. This is one of the simplest ways to stop strengthening the old state. End the sentence earlier. The first half may describe appearance. The second half often recreates identity. Tonight, end the sentence earlier. Nothing happened today. Stop. No meaning, no verdict, no future built from it. Just today. You may find that this feels almost empty. Good. Let there be emptiness. You have filled every silence with fear for too long. Perhaps empty is peaceful. Perhaps an unanswered space is better than the old answer. You do not need a new positive interpretation immediately. This is important. Many people become frightened when they stop telling the old story, so they rush to replace it with another story. Everything is unfolding perfectly. Something amazing must be happening. This delay is surely a sign. Perhaps, perhaps not. You do not need to know. Do not replace one compulsion with another. The goal is not to give every silence a spiritual explanation. The goal is to stop making silence testify against you. That is enough. A quiet day does not have to be a sacred sign. It can simply be a quiet day. A person's silence does not have to mean hidden love. It does not have to mean rejection either. Let it be silence. There is freedom in not assigning meaning too quickly, because once you stop interpreting everything, the old identity loses material. The rejected self needs evidence. The anxious self needs evidence. The struggling self needs evidence. And when evidence is not available, it manufactures it from silence. Do not cooperate tonight. Let the old self go hungry. Give it nothing to interpret. The phone does not ring. Nothing to add. The post does not arrive. Nothing to add. The account does not change. Nothing to add. The conversation does not happen. Nothing to add. You see how quiet this becomes. This is the kind of quiet that can carry you towards sleep. No argument. No forced belief. No prediction. Only refusal to turn absence into doom. Suppose there is someone whose behavior matters greatly to you. You are listening for a change in tone, a word, a gesture, a sign of movement. When none appears, the mind becomes alert. It studies every detail. Perhaps they are more distant. Perhaps they are simply tired. Perhaps they are distracted. Perhaps nothing at all has changed. But the old state says, interpret. It cannot tolerate neutrality. Tonight, resist nothing. Just decline the invitation. You do not need to know what another person's silence means before sleep. You do not need to solve another mind. You do not need to predict tomorrow's conversation. You do not need to replay today's absence. Let them be wherever they are. Let you be here. That is enough. Suppose the desire concerns money. The numbers look the same. The old habit is to take that sameness personally. How can this still be the same? Then worry begins. Calculation, projection. What if next week is the same? What if next month is worse? The figure on the page has now become a whole future. But the figure did not do that. You did. The number is only a number. It is not prophecy. Attend to practical matters when needed. But after that, let the page be a page. Do not take it to bed as scripture. It does not define you. It does not know what tomorrow contains. It cannot speak unless you give it a voice. And if you must give it a voice, do not let it be the old one. Better still, give it none tonight. Let the number be silent. Let the page be silent. Let the account be silent. And you be silent with it. Suppose the matter concerns work. You expected an answer. None came. The old mind says, they chose someone else. But you do not know that. You know only that the answer has not come. Keep to what is known. This is not denial. It is discipline. You refuse to invent a painful future and then call the invention realism. That is what people often do. They imagine failure in advance and name it caution. They imagine rejection in advance and name it preparation. They imagine loss in advance and name it being sensible. But an imagined future is still an imaginal act. Why rehearse one you do not want merely because silence frightened you? Better to leave the page blank. Tomorrow can write itself. Tonight, no prediction is needed. I want you to feel what happens when the mind is no longer obliged to know. There is relief there, a deep relief. You do not know what is moving. Good. You do not know who is thinking what. Good. You do not know which conversation may occur. Good. You do not know when the outer picture changes. Good. You do not need these answers in order to rest from the state you chose. Your assumption does not require complete information. It requires less contradiction. And one of the greatest contradictions is this habit of saying inwardly, because I cannot see movement, there must be none. You do not know that. The unseen does not owe you daily evidence, nor do you need to invent unseen movement to comfort yourself. Again, keep it simple. You have chosen a state. The world is quiet. Let both facts coexist. That is maturity. You can say, I know the state I wish to occupy, and I do not know what the outer world is doing. There is no conflict in that. The old self wants to make uncertainty impossible. The new self can live with some uncertainty, without surrendering identity. That is a very different kind of strength. It is easy to feel secure when every sign is favorable. It is deeper to remain inwardly less disturbed when the signs are absent, not because you are forcing yourself to believe, because you have stopped treating absence as opposition. You are not fighting silence anymore. You are allowing silence to be neutral. And once silence becomes neutral, sleep becomes easier. You no longer need to listen for something. No letter can arrive in the middle of this thought. No answer needs to break through the dark. No person needs to say the perfect words before you close your eyes. You can stop waiting at the gate. This is what I mean when I tell you that silence can become a friend. Not because silence guarantees anything, but because silence gives you the opportunity to see what meaning you have been supplying. You thought the world was discouraging you. Perhaps you were discouraging yourself with interpretation. You thought the delay was speaking. Perhaps you were speaking for it. You thought the quiet meant no. Perhaps no one had said no. This realization can be liberating. You can withdraw the old meaning, not replace it, just withdraw it. Silence, nothing more. And when the mind tries to continue, but surely it means, stop. You do not know. Rest. That sentence can carry you far tonight. You do not know. Rest. You do not know what the letter will say. Rest. You do not know when the call will come. Rest. You do not know what tomorrow contains. Rest. You do not know how the bridge is arranged. Rest. You do not know whether some unseen circumstance is already changing. Rest. Not knowing does not require fear. It can simply be the absence of information. Perhaps there is an old childhood habit in this. When a room becomes quiet after an argument, a child may assume something is wrong. When a parent says nothing, the child may imagine disapproval. Later, the adult carries the same relationship to silence. No answer becomes rejection. No praise becomes failure. No movement becomes loss. But you are not required to continue that old interpretation forever. Tonight, let silence grow up. Let it become spacious. Let it stop meaning danger. A silent room can simply be a room at rest. A silent person can simply be silent. A silent period can simply be a period in which no visible answer has appeared. Nothing more. There is no need to manufacture reassurance. You do not need to whisper, it is coming, it is coming, it is coming, until you are exhausted. That too can become waiting. If you must speak inwardly, say something gentler. There is nothing I need to conclude tonight. That is enough. Or, this silence does not define me. Enough. Or even, not now. Then let the thought fade. You are not here to win an argument with circumstances. You are here to stop making circumstances into judges. The night has become very quiet now. Let it remain so. You may hear sounds outside, a passing car, a door, a clock. Perhaps nothing at all. Let ordinary sounds be ordinary sounds. Do not listen for your desire in them. You do not need a coded message from the night. You do not need the world to wink at you. You do not need a sign before sleep. Let reality be plain. There is dignity in plainness. This bed, this room, this hour, no news, and still you can rest. That is powerful enough. You do not have to turn quiet into excitement. You do not have to make the absence mystical. You do not have to imagine invisible armies rearranging the world. Just stop turning silence into opposition. The old mind has had enough practice doing that. Tonight, practice nothing. Let the space remain empty. Perhaps the manifestation you are concerned about needs less of your commentary. Perhaps the silence around it can become a place where you stop interfering. A blank page, an unspoken sentence, an unopened door. Not forever, just now. And now is all you have to rest in. You may notice the body softening when the mind stops predicting, the jaw no longer preparing for bad news, the chest no longer bracing for a disappointing answer, the hands no longer waiting to grasp proof, the forehead no longer solving tomorrow. That is enough. No visible movement is required before sleep. No announcement, no confirmation, no sign, no reply, no change in figures, no new evidence. Let the outer world keep its silence. You do not need to interpret it. Silence has no meaning until you give it one. So tonight, give it none. Let it be quiet. Let the unanswered remain unanswered. Let the unseen remain unseen. Let the unfinished remain unfinished. Nothing must be resolved before you rest. Nothing must prove itself before you close your eyes. A quiet week is not a prophecy. A quiet day is not failure. A quiet hour is not rejection. Silence is silence. And now, perhaps, it can finally sound like peace. There is a point in this journey where something very subtle begins to change. And because it is subtle, many people overlook it. They are waiting for evidence. A letter, a conversation, a payment, an invitation, a change in behavior, a sudden opening. They imagine that evidence must always arrive as something visible, something that can be pointed to and named. But I tell you, the first evidence of a new state may be that evidence itself begins to matter less. You think of the desire, and there is less hunger in it. You think of the person, and there is less urgency. You remember the money, and the mind does not immediately begin calculating. You consider the future, and something in you says, very quietly, it will be all right. Not as a phrase you are trying to believe, not as an affirmation you repeat because you are afraid. It simply appears as a conclusion. That is different, very different. A forced statement carries effort. A natural conclusion carries identity. When you have to repeat, everything is going to be fine, 50 times because you are frightened that it will not be, the words are trying to overcome a state. But when you are washing your hands, arranging a book, preparing for sleep, and the thought comes softly, it will be all right, without instruction, without performance, then perhaps something has shifted more deeply than you realize. The new state is beginning to speak without being asked. That is worth noticing, but notice it lightly. Do not immediately turn it into another sign to examine. Do not say, I felt peaceful at 3 o'clock. Does that mean my manifestation is near? There is the old habit again, checking, measuring, interpreting. Let the peace be peace. Let the thought be a thought. You do not need to build a prophecy from it. The real value is that the mind, for one moment, did not return to its old conclusion. That is enough. Perhaps yesterday a delay would have ruined your evening. Today the delay occurs, and you are disappointed for a few minutes. Then you continue. That may not feel miraculous. Good. It is not supposed to. It may simply mean that the old state is losing some of its authority. Perhaps someone does not answer as quickly as you hoped. In the past, you would have created an entire story. They are withdrawing. I have done something wrong. This is going badly. Now the silence appears, and you notice the old thought beginning. But it does not travel as far. It starts, then stops. You make supper. You read. You go about the evening. That is not nothing. That is evidence of a different relationship with the same circumstance. And sometimes that is where the new reality begins. Not in the circumstance changing first, in your reaction ceasing to recreate the old identity. This is important because people often look for dramatic proof and miss the quiet transformation already taking place. They want the world to shout, but the state often changes in whispers. A little less fear, a little less urgency, a little less need to convince, a little less interest in what yesterday would have meant. The old self says, you must know. The new self says, I can wait without becoming waiting. The old self says, check again. The new self forgets to check. The old self says, what does this mean? The new self allows one event to remain meaningless. That is a profound shift. Imagine a man who has spent months waiting for an answer regarding work. Every morning he thinks of it immediately. Every afternoon he wonders whether news has come. Every evening he replays possibilities. Then one day he realizes that several hours passed, and he had not thought about the matter at all. His first impulse may be fear. Have I lost interest? Perhaps not. Perhaps the desire is no longer consuming his identity. Perhaps some part of him has stopped standing at the door. Do not confuse the fading of obsession with the fading of desire. They are not the same. You can still want something without being owned by wanting it. In fact, desire often becomes cleaner when desperation leaves. It stops demanding that the object save you. It stops making one outcome responsible for your entire peace. It becomes possible to say inwardly, yes, I desire this, and also, I am not incomplete in this moment. That is powerful. The old state says, until this happens, I cannot be at peace. The new state begins to discover peace before the evidence. Not perfect peace, not constant peace, just moments. And those moments matter because they reveal that you are no longer granting the outer condition total authority over your inner life. This is why I do not want you hunting for mystical signs tonight. You do not need numbers. You do not need coincidences. You do not need hidden messages. You do not need a stranger to say the perfect sentence at the perfect moment. Those things may happen. They may be pleasant. But do not turn them into authority. If you require a sign to believe, then the sign has become your cause. And the whole purpose of this teaching is to return the cause inward. Your state is the cause. Your assumption is the place of power, not the sign, not the coincidence, not the letter, not another person's expression. So perhaps the evidence you truly want to notice is not out there. Perhaps it is the fact that you are beginning to need less from out there. You can pass the post box without the heart jumping. You can look at the account without turning one number into your identity. You can hear another person's silence without immediately becoming rejected. You can think of the desire without leaning toward it. You can have a good afternoon before the outcome is known. This is where naturalness begins, and naturalness is far more important than excitement. A man who expects to be paid does not spend every hour wondering whether payment exists. A woman who knows she is loved does not require every conversation to prove love. A person who belongs somewhere does not stop at the threshold each morning to ask whether entry is still permitted. Possession reduces interrogation. Remember that. Possession reduces interrogation. So if the questions are becoming fewer, perhaps do not rush to replace them with new questions. If you notice less anxiety, do not immediately ask what the reduced anxiety means. Let it mean less anxiety. Do not disturb every quiet change by naming it. Some states strengthen best when they are left alone. There is something very revealing about what the mind does when it is no longer being watched. If you spend all day deliberately affirming, deliberately visualizing, deliberately correcting, you may not know where consciousness returns naturally. But then there is a moment when you are occupied with something ordinary. You are walking, reading, putting away a coat, and suddenly you think of the desire. What is the spontaneous conclusion? That is interesting. Perhaps once it was, I wonder if it will ever happen. Now it is. It will be all right. Perhaps once it was, I hope they choose me. Now it is, I do not need to chase this. Perhaps once it was, how am I going to manage? Now it is, I will handle it. These quiet conclusions tell you something. Not about the future with certainty, about the state you are beginning to inhabit. And that is what matters. You are not looking for proof that the world must behave one exact way. You are noticing that you are no longer being shaped so completely by the old expectation. This is freedom. Suppose the manifestation concerns money. Before, every unexpected expense produced the same chain. Fear, calculation, Future projection. Identity. I am always struggling. Now an expense appears. You may still dislike it. You may still make practical adjustments. But the sentence, I am always struggling, does not come. Or it comes and feels old, foreign, unconvincing. That is important. The old state is becoming less natural. The event may be the same. The interpretation is changing. And when interpretation changes consistently, the whole experience of life changes. Suppose the desire concerns love. Before, one quiet evening was enough to make you feel forgotten. Now you can experience silence without immediately constructing abandonment. You may still prefer communication. You may still desire closeness. But silence no longer has the same power to tell you who you are. That is evidence of a stronger self-concept. Suppose the desire concerns work or success. Before, one criticism would follow you into bed. You would repeat it, defend against it. Imagine what it meant for your future. Now you hear criticism, and perhaps you learn from it. Perhaps you disagree with it, but it does not become a verdict. You remain yourself. That is a state becoming more stable. This is the kind of evidence I want you to respect. Quiet evidence. Evidence that does not require the world to perform for you. Evidence that appears in how much less easily you are thrown out of your chosen position. You see, the old state was not powerful merely because circumstances repeated. It was powerful because every circumstance could recruit you. A look recruited you. A number recruited you. A delay recruited you. A memory recruited you. One small thing happened, and immediately you became the old self. Now perhaps the world still presents similar things, but recruitment becomes harder. The old state calls. You do not always answer. That is progress. And again, do not make progress into pressure. You do not need to remain unmoved by everything. That is not what I am asking. You are not trying to become stone. You may feel disappointment. You may feel impatient. You may have a difficult hour. The question is what happens next. Do you turn one difficult hour into 3 days of the old identity? Or do you return, perhaps faster than before? That return matters. Once, a doubt lasted a week. Now it lasts an evening. Once, silence meant rejection. Now it means uncertainty for a little while, then nothing. Once, an expense meant ruin. Now it means a problem to solve. Once, a delay meant failure. Now it means delay. Do you see what is happening? The facts are becoming smaller. Identity is becoming larger. This is what a new state does. It allows events to remain events. It stops turning everything into autobiography. A bad afternoon no longer means my life is bad. One refusal no longer means I am rejected. One difficulty no longer means nothing works for me. That is enormous, and it may happen so quietly that no one around you notices. Perhaps even you barely notice. Good. The deepest shifts are often private. You do not need an audience. You do not need to announce that you are changing. You do not need to explain your manifestation to anyone. There comes a time when the desire becomes more private, because the need for agreement disappears. You no longer ask people, do you think it will happen? Why would you? Their answer cannot create your state for you. You stop collecting opinions. You stop telling the story, just to hear reassurance. You become quieter, not secretive from fear, quiet from ownership. A person does not continually discuss what feels settled. This too can be evidence. You feel less need to speak about it, less need to explain, less need to defend why you believe, less need to convince someone else so that you may borrow their conviction. You become your own inner witness. That is a beautiful place to arrive. Perhaps the desire still matters deeply, but it is no longer exposed to every passing opinion. You hold it more gently, like something already belonging to the private interior of your life. This is why a state can become stronger, while appearing less intense. At the beginning, everything is effort. You imagine deliberately. You repeat, you correct, you return. Later, the state begins doing some of this for you. The new conclusion comes automatically. The new reaction appears before you remember to manufacture it. The old fear feels exaggerated. The old story begins to sound repetitive. And perhaps one evening you catch yourself thinking, I do not want to think about this anymore. Do not assume that means failure. Ask instead, do I not want it, or do I no longer want to worry about it? There is a difference. Sometimes you are not tired of the desire. You are tired of the old relationship to the desire. You are tired of chasing it, analyzing it, measuring it, discussing it, waiting for it. That exhaustion can be healthy if you allow it to end the compulsive behavior rather than the state itself. Perhaps something in you says, enough. Not enough of the desire, enough of the checking, enough of asking when, enough of making life pause until one thing happens. That enough can be a doorway into naturalness. The first evidence of a new state may be that evidence itself begins to matter less. Let that sentence become quiet in you. Evidence matters less, not because you have become foolish, not because you refuse to see facts, because facts are no longer asked to tell you who you are every moment. You can see a fact and remain larger than it. You can see a delay and remain secure. You can see an unchanged circumstance and still not return entirely to the old conclusion. That is strength. It may not feel spiritual. Good. Real transformation often looks ordinary. You sleep better. You stop checking. You speak less about the desire. You enjoy something unrelated to it. You notice that laughter can happen before fulfillment. You begin planning your day without placing the desire at the center of every hour. Life expands again. And strangely, when life expands, desire often becomes easier to hold. It is no longer the sole source of meaning. It becomes part of a larger self. That larger self is what I want for you. Not a person who has mastered one technique. A person who is no longer psychologically imprisoned by one outcome. A person who can desire strongly and still breathe. Who can imagine beautifully and still sleep. Who can hope without leaning. Who can wait without becoming waiting. Who can experience silence without becoming abandoned. Who can encounter delay without becoming denied. That is a state worth occupying. So tonight, do not ask the world to give you evidence before you rest. And do not ask yourself to produce evidence either. If you feel peaceful, fine. If you do not, fine. If you forgot about the desire for 3 hours, fine. If you thought about it all afternoon, fine. Do not make another scale. Do not start measuring whether you need less evidence correctly. You see how quickly the mind tries to turn freedom into another assignment. No assignment. Let the night be easier than that. Perhaps all you need to notice is this. You are here. You have already chosen something inwardly. The world does not need to confirm it before sleep. That is enough. If some gentle confidence arises, receive it. If the thought appears, it will be all right. Do not strengthen it. Do not repeat it 20 times. Let it pass through you like a familiar voice. It will be all right. Maybe that is how the new state sounds when no one is forcing it to speak. And if no such thought appears tonight, there is no failure. You are not hunting for symptoms. You are simply allowing your dependence upon evidence to loosen. One less check, one less interpretation, one less question. One more ordinary moment in which your desire is not controlling your attention. That may be enough for one night. You do not need signs. You do not need coincidences. You do not need the world to arrange a little performance just before sleep. Perhaps the most meaningful change is already quieter than that. You are becoming less hungry for proof, less frightened by silence, less impressed by delay, less willing to let one fact define the whole. And perhaps one day you will realize that the evidence you were waiting for was preceded by something much more important. You had already stopped waiting in the old way. You had already begun to feel at home before the door visibly opened. You had already become less dependent upon the reflection. The first evidence of a new state may be that evidence itself begins to matter less. Let it matter less tonight. No need to look. No need to confirm. No need to interpret. Let one quiet inner conclusion be enough. It will be all right, and then let even that sentence go. There is a point in this journey where something very subtle begins to change, and because it is subtle, many people overlook it. They are waiting for evidence, a letter, a conversation, a payment, an invitation, a change in behavior, a sudden opening. They imagine that evidence must always arrive as something visible, something that can be pointed to and named. But I tell you, the first evidence of a new state may be that evidence itself begins to matter less. You think of the desire, and there is less hunger in it. You think of the person, and there is less urgency. You remember the money, and the mind does not immediately begin calculating. You consider the future, and something in you says, very quietly, it will be all right. Not as a phrase you are trying to believe. Not as an affirmation you repeat because you are afraid. It simply appears as a conclusion. That is different. Very different. A forced statement carries effort. A natural conclusion carries identity. When you have to repeat, everything is going to be fine, 50 times because you are frightened that it will not be. The words are trying to overcome a state. But when you are washing your hands, arranging a book, preparing for sleep, and the thought comes softly, it will be all right, without instruction, without performance, then perhaps something has shifted more deeply than you realize. The new state is beginning to speak without being asked. That is worth noticing, but notice it lightly. Do not immediately turn it into another sign to examine. Do not say, I felt peaceful at 3 o'clock. Does that mean my manifestation is near? There is the old habit again. Checking, measuring, interpreting. Let the peace be peace. Let the thought be a thought. You do not need to build a prophecy from it. The real value is that the mind, for one moment, did not return to its old conclusion. That is enough. Perhaps yesterday a delay would have ruined your evening. Today the delay occurs, and you are disappointed for a few minutes. Then you continue. That may not feel miraculous. Good. It is not supposed to. It may simply mean that the old state is losing some of its authority. Perhaps someone does not answer as quickly as you hoped. In the past, you would have created an entire story. They are withdrawing. I have done something wrong. This is going badly. Now the silence appears, and you notice the old thought beginning, but it does not travel as far. It starts, then stops. You make supper. You read. You go about the evening. That is not nothing. That is evidence of a different relationship with the same circumstance. And sometimes that is where the new reality begins. Not in the circumstance changing first, in your reaction ceasing to recreate the old identity. This is important because people often look for dramatic proof and miss the quiet transformation already taking place. They want the world to shout, but the state often changes in whispers. A little less fear, a little less urgency, a little less need to convince, a little less interest in what yesterday would have meant. The old self says, you must know. The new self says, I can wait without becoming waiting. The old self says, check again. The new self forgets to check. The old self says, what does this mean? The new self allows one event to remain meaningless. That is a profound shift. Imagine a man who has spent months waiting for an answer regarding work. Every morning he thinks of it immediately. Every afternoon he wonders whether news has come. Every evening he replays possibilities. Then one day he realizes that several hours passed, and he had not thought about the matter at all. His first impulse may be fear. Have I lost interest? Perhaps not. Perhaps the desire is no longer consuming his identity. Perhaps some part of him has stopped standing at the door. Do not confuse the fading of obsession with the fading of desire. They are not the same. You can still want something without being owned by wanting it. In fact, desire often becomes cleaner when desperation leaves. It stops demanding that the object save you. It stops making one outcome responsible for your entire peace. It becomes possible to say inwardly, yes, I desire this. And also, I am not incomplete in this moment. That is powerful. The old state says, until this happens, I cannot be at peace. The new state begins to discover peace before the evidence. Not perfect peace, not constant peace, just moments. And those moments matter because they reveal that you are no longer granting the outer condition total authority over your inner life. This is why I do not want you hunting for mystical signs tonight. You do not need numbers. You do not need coincidences. You do not need hidden messages. You do not need a stranger to say the perfect sentence at the perfect moment. Those things may happen. They may be pleasant. But do not turn them into authority. If you require a sign to believe, then the sign has become your cause, and the whole purpose of this teaching is to return the cause inward. Your state is the cause. Your assumption is the place of power, not the sign, not the coincidence, not the letter, not another person's expression. So perhaps the evidence you truly want to notice is not out there. Perhaps it is the fact that you are beginning to need less from out there. You can pass the post box without the heart jumping. You can look at the account without turning one number into your identity. You can hear another person's silence without immediately becoming rejected. You can think of the desire without leaning toward it. You can have a good afternoon before the outcome is known. This is where naturalness begins, and naturalness is far more important than excitement. A man who expects to be paid does not spend every hour wondering whether payment exists. A woman who knows she is loved does not require every conversation to prove love. A person who belongs somewhere does not stop at the threshold each morning to ask whether entry is still permitted. Possession reduces interrogation. Remember that. Possession reduces interrogation. So if the questions are becoming fewer, perhaps do not rush to replace them with new questions. If you notice less anxiety, do not immediately ask what the reduced anxiety means. Let it mean less anxiety. Do not disturb every quiet change by naming it. Some states strengthen best when they are left alone. There is something very revealing about what the mind does when it is no longer being watched. If you spend all day deliberately affirming, deliberately visualizing, deliberately correcting, you may not know where consciousness returns naturally. But then there is a moment when you are occupied with something ordinary. You are walking, reading, putting away a coat, and suddenly you think of the desire. What is the spontaneous conclusion? That is interesting. Perhaps once it was. I wonder if it will ever happen. Now it is. It will be all right. Perhaps once it was. I hope they choose me. Now it is. I do not need to chase this. Perhaps once it was. How am I going to manage? Now it is. I will handle it. These quiet conclusions tell you something. Not about the future with certainty, about the state you are beginning to inhabit, and that is what matters. You are not looking for proof that the world must behave one exact way. You are noticing that you are no longer being shaped so completely by the old expectation. This is freedom. Suppose the manifestation concerns money. Before, every unexpected expense produced the same chain: fear, calculation, future projection, identity. I am always struggling. Now an expense appears. You may still dislike it. You may still make practical adjustments. But the sentence, I am always struggling, does not come. Or it comes and feels old, foreign, unconvincing. That is important. The old state is becoming less natural. The event may be the same. The interpretation is changing. And when interpretation changes consistently, the whole experience of life changes. Suppose the desire concerns love. Before, one quiet evening was enough to make you feel forgotten. Now you can experience silence without immediately constructing abandonment. You may still prefer communication. You may still desire closeness. But silence no longer has the same power to tell you who you are. That is evidence of a stronger self-concept. Suppose the desire concerns work or success. Before, one criticism would follow you into bed. You would repeat it, defend against it. Imagine what it meant for your future. Now you hear criticism, and perhaps you learn from it. Perhaps you disagree with it, but it does not become a verdict. You remain yourself. That is a state becoming more stable. This is the kind of evidence I want you to respect. Quiet evidence. Evidence that does not require the world to perform for you. Evidence that appears in how much less easily you are thrown out of your chosen position. You see, the old state was not powerful merely because circumstances repeated. It was powerful because every circumstance could recruit you. A look recruited you. A number recruited you. A delay recruited you. A memory recruited you. One small thing happened, and immediately you became the old self. Now perhaps the world still presents similar things, but recruitment becomes harder. The old state calls. You do not always answer. That is progress. And again, do not make progress into pressure. You do not need to remain unmoved by everything. That is not what I am asking. You are not trying to become stone. You may feel disappointment. You may feel impatient. You may have a difficult hour. The question is, what happens next? Do you turn one difficult hour into 3 days of the old identity? Or do you return, perhaps faster than before? That return matters. Once, a doubt lasted a week. Now it lasts an evening. Once, silence meant rejection. Now it means uncertainty for a little while, then nothing. Once, an expense meant ruin. Now it means a problem to solve. Once, a delay meant failure. Now it means delay. Do you see what is happening? The facts are becoming smaller. Identity is becoming larger. This is what a new state does. It allows events to remain events. It stops turning everything into autobiography. A bad afternoon no longer means my life is bad. One refusal no longer means I am rejected. One difficulty no longer means nothing works for me. That is enormous, and it may happen so quietly that no one around you notices. Perhaps even you barely notice. Good. The deepest shifts are often private. You do not need an audience. You do not need to announce that you are changing. You do not need to explain your manifestation to anyone. There comes a time when the desire becomes more private, because the need for agreement disappears. You no longer ask people, do you think it will happen? Why would you? Their answer cannot create your state for you. You stop collecting opinions. You stop telling the story just to hear reassurance. You become quieter, not secretive from fear, quiet from ownership. A person does not continually discuss what feels settled. This too can be evidence. You feel less need to speak about it, less need to explain, less need to defend why you believe, less need to convince someone else so that you may borrow their conviction. You become your own inner witness. That is a beautiful place to arrive. Perhaps the desire still matters deeply, but it is no longer exposed to every passing opinion. You hold it more gently, like something already belonging to the private interior of your life. This is why a state can become stronger, while appearing less intense. At the beginning, everything is effort. You imagine deliberately. You repeat, you correct, you return. Later, the state begins doing some of this for you. The new conclusion comes automatically. The new reaction appears before you remember to manufacture it. The old fear feels exaggerated. The old story begins to sound repetitive. And perhaps one evening you catch yourself thinking, I do not want to think about this anymore. Do not assume that means failure. Ask instead, do I not want it, or do I no longer want to worry about it? There is a difference. Sometimes you are not tired of the desire. You are tired of the old relationship to the desire. You are tired of chasing it, analyzing it, measuring it, discussing it, waiting for it. That exhaustion can be healthy if you allow it to end the compulsive behavior, rather than the state itself. Perhaps something in you says, enough. Not enough of the desire, enough of the checking, enough of asking when, enough of making life pause until one thing happens. That enough can be a doorway into naturalness. The first evidence of a new state may be that evidence itself begins to matter less. Let that sentence become quiet in you. Evidence matters less, not because you have become foolish, not because you refuse to see facts, because facts are no longer asked to tell you who you are every moment. You can see a fact and remain larger than it. You can see a delay and remain secure. You can see an unchanged circumstance and still not return entirely to the old conclusion. That is strength. It may not feel spiritual. Good. Real transformation often looks ordinary. You sleep better. You stop checking. You speak less about the desire. You enjoy something unrelated to it. You notice that laughter can happen before fulfillment. You begin planning your day without placing the desire at the center of every hour. Life expands again. And strangely, when life expands, desire often becomes easier to hold. It is no longer the sole source of meaning. It becomes part of a larger self. That larger self is what I want for you. Not a person who has mastered one technique. A person who is no longer psychologically imprisoned by one outcome. A person who can desire strongly and still breathe. Who can imagine beautifully and still sleep. Who can hope without leaning. Who can wait without becoming waiting. Who can experience silence without becoming abandoned. who can encounter delay without becoming denied. That is a state worth occupying. So tonight, do not ask the world to give you evidence before you rest. And do not ask yourself to produce evidence either. If you feel peaceful, fine. If you do not, fine. If you forgot about the desire for 3 hours, fine. If you thought about it all afternoon, fine. Do not make another scale. Do not start measuring whether you need less evidence correctly. You see how quickly the mind tries to turn freedom into another assignment. No assignment. Let the night be easier than that. Perhaps all you need to notice is this. You are here. You have already chosen something inwardly. The world does not need to confirm it before sleep. That is enough. If some gentle confidence arises, receive it. If the thought appears, it will be all right. Do not strengthen it. Do not repeat it 20 times. Let it pass through you like a familiar voice. It will be all right. Maybe that is how the new state sounds when no one is forcing it to speak. And if no such thought appears tonight, there is no failure. You are not hunting for symptoms. You are simply allowing your dependence upon evidence to loosen. One less check, one less interpretation, one less question, one more ordinary moment in which your desire is not controlling your attention. That may be enough for one night. You do not need signs. You do not need coincidences. You do not need the world to arrange a little performance just before sleep. Perhaps the most meaningful change is already quieter than that. You are becoming less hungry for proof, less frightened by silence, less impressed by delay, less willing to let one fact define the whole. And perhaps one day you will realize that the evidence you were waiting for was preceded by something much more important. You had already stopped waiting in the old way. You had already begun to feel at home before the door visibly opened. You had already become less dependent upon the reflection. The first evidence of a new state may be that evidence itself begins to matter less. Let it matter less tonight. No need to look. No need to confirm. No need to interpret. Let one quiet inner conclusion be enough. It will be all right. And then let even that sentence go. There is something I want you to understand before you go any deeper into this night. The return of an old thought does not mean the return of your old life. A fear may appear, a doubt may speak, a memory may rise without invitation, an old disappointment may come back with surprising clarity. And because you have learned to value assumption, you may become alarmed by this. You may think, there it is, I have ruined the state. No. An old thought returning is not the same thing as you returning to the old state. There is a difference between a visitor and an occupant. There is a difference between hearing a knock at the door and giving someone the house. You have lived in certain states for years. Perhaps you expected disappointment for years. Perhaps you assumed struggle for years. Perhaps you interpreted silence as rejection for years. Perhaps you treated money as danger for years. Perhaps you believed that good things were difficult to keep. Those assumptions became familiar, and whatever becomes familiar acquires momentum. It learns the roads of the mind. It knows which doors used to open easily. So when you begin to occupy something new, do not be surprised if the old state still knows how to find you. That is not failure. That is familiarity. A road does not vanish the first day you stop walking it, but you do not have to travel it, simply because you remember where it goes. This is what I want you to practice tonight. Not fighting the old thought, not explaining it, not correcting it with panic, simply recognizing it. There is the old road, and then not taking it. That is enough. Suppose you are lying here, and suddenly a memory appears of the last time something went wrong. The mind immediately offers the old conclusion. You see, this may happen again. Do not wrestle with it. You do not have to prove that the opposite must happen. You do not have to summon 10 affirmations. You do not have to create a magnificent scene to cancel the memory. You may simply say inwardly, that was then, and return. Return to what? To the state you chose. Perhaps that state has no words. Perhaps it is only the quiet feeling that you are no longer the same person who must repeat that story. That is enough. The old state wants argument because argument keeps attention upon it. You think you are defeating it, but you are still giving it the center of the room. Do not make every doubt important enough for a trial. Some doubts deserve no hearing. Let them pass through. This is especially important for those who have become obsessed with having a perfect mind. There is no such requirement. You are not trying to become a person in whom no unwanted thought can ever arise. That would be another prison. The mind is capable of remembering many things. You may hear an old phrase, see an old face, feel an old fear. None of these by themselves define the state you occupy. The state is revealed more by what you return to than by what briefly passes through you. Remember that. What do you return to? That is more important than what visits. If fear comes and you remain with it for a moment, fine. If doubt comes and you feel it, fine. If disappointment appears, fine. You are not required to become emotionally artificial. You are not required to smile inwardly at every difficulty. You are simply learning not to use every passing reaction as proof that nothing has changed. Perhaps you once believed that one doubtful thought could destroy a manifestation. Think what a frightening doctrine that would be. You would spend the whole day afraid of your own mind. You would turn inward and become a god, watching, policing, correcting, punishing, and all in the name of faith. No, faith does not need that kind of fear. A state that is becoming natural can survive a passing contradiction. A relationship can survive one disagreement. A home can survive one untidy room. A man does not cease to be prosperous because he dislikes an expense. A woman does not cease to be loved because she feels lonely for an hour. A confident person does not cease to be confident because nervousness visits before an important conversation. So why would you assume that your new state must vanish because one old thought appeared? Let the new state be sturdier than that. Perhaps the old fear says, nothing is happening. You hear it. Then perhaps a deeper part of you says nothing at all. You simply continue resting. That silence may be stronger than argument. Perhaps the old state says, you always lose. You remember the sentence. It once felt true. Now perhaps it feels familiar but not absolute. That is already a shift. Do not require the old thought to feel ridiculous immediately. It may still feel convincing for a while. Familiar things often do. A worn coat fits the body because it has been shaped by years of wear. That does not mean it is the only garment you own. You can take it off. And at first, the new garment may feel strange. The old one may even seem more comfortable. Not because it is better, because it is known. This is why I tell you not to mistake familiarity for truth. The old state may return with the authority of habit, but habit is not destiny. A thought can be old and loud and still not deserve your loyalty. You do not need to exile it. You simply stop signing your name beneath it. Let it speak without agreement. This is a useful distinction. A thought appears. They may reject me. You do not need to say, no, they absolutely will not. Perhaps you simply decline to continue the sentence. A thought appears. I may not have enough. You do not need to force. I have millions. You may simply refuse to become the one whose whole identity is lack. A thought appears. What if it takes too long? You do not have to answer. You can leave the question unanswered. You are not obliged to respond to every voice that rises within. That is freedom. Many people think freedom means never hearing the old voice. I tell you, freedom begins when the old voice can speak and you no longer have to obey. That is a much deeper form of change. Perhaps tonight the mind remembers an old rejection. You feel the familiar contraction. The old state begins saying, this always happens. Stop there. You do not need to erase the memory. You do not need to revise it now. You simply do not extend it into law. One event happened. It does not become always, unless you keep adding that word. Perhaps the memory remains. Let it remain as memory. Do not let it recruit the future. This is what returning means. You are not returning to a thought. You are returning to identity. Who are you now? Not who were you in that memory. Not who were you in that disappointment. Who are you choosing to be now? Perhaps the answer is simple. I am no longer the one who expects this. Good. Do not repeat it like a machine. Feel the direction, then rest. The old state may appear again 10 minutes later. Fine. Return again, not angrily, not with disappointment, not saying, why is this still here? Because every time you ask why, the old thought is still here. You give it new importance. Let it be old. That is enough. An old thought can be old without becoming dangerous. A church bell heard in the distance does not require you to walk toward the church. A train whistle does not require you to board the train. A remembered voice does not require you to return to the room where it was spoken. You can hear and remain where you are. This is the posture of the new state, not numbness, not denial, choice. There will be nights when returning feels easy. There will be nights when the old state feels stronger. Do not make either night final. You are not measuring perfection. You are establishing familiarity. Every quiet return makes the new state less foreign. That is all. Perhaps one night you return 20 times. Perhaps another night only once. Perhaps you fall asleep before you even notice. None of this needs to become a problem. You are not counting returns. You are becoming someone for whom return is natural. This is much more important. The old self says, I doubted. I ruined it. The new self says, I doubted. Then I came back. Simple. No confession. No punishment. No rebuilding. You came back. That is enough. Imagine a man learning to live in a new city. At first, he takes the wrong road. He turns automatically toward the old station. He walks several streets before realizing. Does he say, I have failed to live here? No. He turns around. Soon the new roads become familiar. Eventually he no longer thinks about them. This is how states become natural. At first, you notice every return. Later, you simply live there. Do not expect the new state to feel native on the first night. Let it acquire your footsteps. Let it learn your weight. Let your inner life become accustomed to it. The old state had years of repetition. Give the new one some patience, not strain. Patience. This is especially important when fear appears suddenly in the body. You may be lying quietly and feel a wave of uneasiness. Do not make it metaphysical. Do not say something is wrong. Do not say this must mean the manifestation is blocked. It may mean only that you feel uneasy. That is enough. Let the body have a moment, without turning the moment into doctrine. A sensation is not a prophecy. A mood is not a decree. A bad hour is not an identity. Let these things remain small. The old state survives partly by making every small reaction enormous. You feel nervous. The old state says, I am back at the beginning. You feel disappointed. The old state says, nothing has changed. You remember the past. The old state says, this is who I really am. No. Keep the event its proper size. A thought, a feeling, a memory. Nothing more unless you decide to live there again. This is why I prefer the image of a house. You may pass your old house. You may even stop outside. You may remember how it felt to live there. Perhaps for a moment you feel the old atmosphere, but you do not have to move your furniture back in. That is what returning to the old state would be. Not remembering it, not seeing it, not feeling a trace of it, moving back in, making it home again. Do not confuse passing the old address with changing residence. You are learning another home now. Let that image become quiet. Another home, the new state, perhaps still unfamiliar, perhaps not fully furnished. Perhaps you are still learning where things belong. Fine. You live there anyway. And if the old state sends you a letter, you do not have to answer. You can leave it unopened tonight. Perhaps it says, you have been disappointed before. Yes. And you have doubted before. Yes. And you have failed before. Perhaps. And the old state expects history to be a command. It is not. History is memory. You are free to stop making it instruction. This is where many people become trapped. They believe they must erase every trace of the past before they can live differently. No, the past may remain known. The memory may remain available, but its authority can disappear. That is enough. You do not need amnesia. You need a new relationship with memory. You can say, I remember when I thought that way. Notice the distance in that sentence. I remember when, not I am still. That little shift matters. Perhaps tonight, an old fear appears, and instead of saying, here I go again, you say inwardly, I know this thought. That is all. Not this is me. I know this thought. You have seen it before. You know where it leads. You do not need to follow. Then return, perhaps to the feeling of being settled, perhaps to the image of the matter resolved, perhaps to one simple sentence, perhaps to nothing. The return does not have to be elaborate. If you make returning into a complicated ritual, you may avoid doing it. Keep it easy. One breath, one inward turn, one quiet recollection of the end. Enough. You are not trying to force the old state out. You are making the new state easier to re-enter. That is a gentler way to live, and gentleness matters, because force often reveals fear. When you attack a doubt as though it can ruin everything, you have given doubt enormous power. When you say, I must get rid of this thought immediately, you treat it as dangerous. What if it is not dangerous? What if it is merely old? Then you can let it pass. This changes everything. The old thought comes. You do not panic. You do not celebrate it. You do not analyze it. You recognize it. Then return. That is the whole movement. Recognize. Return. No battle. No drama. No purification. No mystical explanation. Just a choice. And the more often you make that choice quietly, the less compelling the old road becomes. One day the thought appears, and you barely notice it. Another day it appears, and seems strangely exaggerated. Another day you remember that you used to believe it. This is how familiarity shifts. Slowly enough that you may not notice the exact moment. The old state becomes a language you can still understand, but no longer speak automatically. That is beautiful. Do not rush it. Tonight, if an old thought appears, let this be your freedom. You do not have to make it mean anything. It does not mean you failed. It does not mean you lost the manifestation. It does not mean the outer world is turning against you. It does not mean you must start over. It is a thought. Old perhaps, familiar perhaps, unpleasant perhaps, still only a thought. Let it move. And if it returns, let it return. You are not afraid of return, because you know how to return too. The thought returns. You return. The fear returns. You return. The memory returns. You return. Not in exhaustion, in quiet authority. Each time there is less ceremony, until eventually perhaps the old thought comes and finds no room prepared for it. No chair, no meal, no conversation. It passes on, and you remain. That is all I want for you tonight. Not perfection, not a silent mind, not a mind emptied of history. A mind no longer ruled by every familiar visitor. A state that can remain yours even when an old voice is heard in the distance. Let the distance remain. No need to silence the voice. No need to chase it. No need to prove anything. You know where you are returning. That is enough. An old thought returning is not the same thing as you returning to the old state. Let that become natural. The old state may knock. You do not have to open. And if you do open for a moment, you can still close the door again. No punishment, no failure. Just return, quietly, again and again, until returning becomes home. There will be moments when the outer world appears to contradict everything you have chosen inwardly. A letter does not say what you hoped. A person answers coldly. An opportunity is delayed. An expense arrives unexpectedly. A conversation leaves you unsettled. Something happens, and the old self immediately rises with its familiar sentence. There, I knew it. Notice how quickly it speaks. It does not wait. It does not investigate. It does not allow one event to remain one event. It takes a single moment and turns it into a verdict. One rejection becomes, I am rejected. One delay becomes, nothing is working. One expense becomes, I am back in lack. One awkward conversation becomes, this relationship is failing. One difficult day becomes, I have lost the state. This is what I want you to stop doing. Do not make one page the ending of a book still being written. A page is a page. A chapter is a chapter. An event is an event. It has no authority to define the entire state unless you give it that authority. This is where many people unknowingly strengthen the very condition they wish to leave. They experience one contrary event and immediately organize their whole identity around it. They say, you see, I was right to worry. And in that moment, they are no longer simply responding to an event. They are reviving an old self. That old self knows exactly what to do with difficulty. It turns difficulty into prophecy. It says, This is how things always go for me. It says, I should have known. It says, nothing ever changes. Be careful with those sentences. They seem like observations. They are assumptions, and assumptions do not merely describe experience. They organize it. So when something contrary appears, I do not ask you to pretend it is wonderful. I do not ask you to call rejection success. I do not ask you to call loss gain. I do not ask you to smile at every inconvenience and declare that it must be a secret blessing. That too can become another form of fear. You are afraid to let anything be unpleasant, so you rush to make it meaningful. No. Sometimes an inconvenience is simply an inconvenience. Sometimes a delay is simply a delay. Sometimes a person is simply having a difficult day. Sometimes a door closes and you do not yet know what that means. Sometimes a bill arrives because bills arrive. You do not need to make every ordinary event metaphysical. This is maturity. The old mind wants everything to mean something. The new state can allow some things to mean nothing. That is freedom. Suppose you receive a disappointing answer. Feel the disappointment if it comes. Do not deny it. But do not turn the answer into a definition of yourself. You may say, I did not want that answer. Fine. Stop there. Do not add, this proves I am not chosen. That second sentence is where identity enters. Suppose an expense appears. You may say, this is inconvenient. Fine. Do not immediately add, I am always struggling. One sentence describes an event. The other resurrects a state. Learn the difference. Suppose someone speaks sharply. You may say, that hurt. Fine. Do not immediately add, people always treat me this way. Again, the first sentence is about the moment. The second is about who you believe yourself to be. And the second sentence is far more dangerous than the event itself, because it turns one moment into continuity. This is why I want you to become very careful with conclusions, not fearful, careful. You are not trying to police every word. You are simply refusing to let one circumstance become judge and jury over your whole identity. The old self loves instant verdicts. It finds comfort in certainty, even when the certainty is painful. At least I know how this ends. But do you? Perhaps not. Perhaps you know only what happened today. And today is not the whole story. You do not need to know what comes next tonight. Let the event remain unfinished. There is strength in an unfinished event. It has not yet become your conclusion. Suppose you have assumed success in your work and then receive criticism. The old self says, there, you are not good enough. But criticism does not say that. Criticism says only that someone criticized something. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps they are wrong. Perhaps there is something useful in it. Perhaps there is not. But the state I am established, capable, useful, does not have to collapse because one person has an opinion. A tree does not stop being a tree because one branch is cut. Let your state have more depth than that. Suppose you have assumed love and then experienced distance. The old self says, there, it is happening again. What is it? Perhaps only distance. Do not give it history unless history is truly there. The mind likes to collect old evidence. One present silence awakens 10 previous silences. One present disappointment summons a whole procession of earlier disappointments. Now you are not responding to one event. You are responding to a lifetime of interpretation. This is how a small thing becomes overwhelming. Keep the event in the present. This happened, not this always happens. There is enormous power in removing the word always, and also never. Those words are heavy. They make temporary conditions permanent in imagination. I am always overlooked. I never get what I want. People always leave. Money never stays. Notice the absolute quality. The old state speaks in absolutes, because absolutes make it feel like destiny. But a contrary event is not destiny. It is an event. Let it remain one. Do not make one page the ending of a book still being written. Perhaps the page is unpleasant. Perhaps you would not choose it. Perhaps you wish it had been different. Still, it is not the ending. There are many people who abandon a state because one fact appears to contradict it. They say, I imagined being secure, but then this happened. I imagined being loved, but then they said that. I imagined being successful, but then I was refused, and they treat contradiction as cancellation. Why? Because they still believe the outer world has the final word. But if the outer world is always allowed to define your state, then the state was never truly yours. You were only borrowing it while conditions were favorable. The deeper practice begins when conditions are not favorable, not because difficulty is sacred, not because you should seek it, but because contrary evidence reveals whether you still allow facts to decide who you are. That is the useful question. Not, why did this happen? Not, is this a sign? Not, is this the bridge? Simply, will I let this event decide my identity? That is enough. Sometimes the answer may be yes for a while. You may react. You may become upset. You may fall back into the old conclusion. Fine. Then notice and return. Again, return is not starting over. You are not rebuilding the whole state because one event disturbed you. You are simply refusing to let the disturbance become a residence. This is important for sleep. At night, events grow larger in memory. A sentence said in the afternoon becomes louder in darkness. An expression on someone's face becomes more significant. A bill becomes heavier. A delay becomes longer. The mind replays the event, and each replay adds weight. Soon one page has become the whole book. Do not do that tonight. Let the page remain where it belongs. Today. One moment. One event. No sequel written yet. Perhaps you can even say inwardly, this is not the whole story. Not as forced optimism, as a factual statement. Because it is not. You do not know the whole story. Neither does the event. A door closed at 4 o'clock does not know what happens next month. A conversation this evening does not know what is said next week. A number on a page does not know what opportunities exist beyond it. So why give temporary evidence such absolute authority? Let facts be facts. Do not make them gods. You can respect facts without worshipping them. Attend to what must be attended to. If there is a practical matter, handle it. If there is something to correct, correct it. If an apology is needed, give it. If a decision must be made, make it. But do not attach your entire identity to the practical event. That is the difference between responsibility and psychological bondage. Responsibility says, this must be handled. Bondage says, this proves what kind of life I have. One is action, the other is assumption. Suppose an unexpected expense arrives. Responsibility may say, I will see what can be done. Bondage says, of course, something always goes wrong. The first response remains open. The second closes the future around the past. Suppose someone declines your request. Responsibility may say, very well. I will consider another way. Bondage says, I am never chosen. Again, one leaves movement possible. The other turns one moment into identity. You see how important language becomes. Not because words are magical objects, because words reveal the state from which you are interpreting. And tonight, we are not trying to speak perfectly. We are trying to stop turning every event into a verdict. That is gentler. Perhaps there is something that happened today that you have already judged too strongly. Think of it for a moment. Not the whole story, just the event. What happened? Strip away the conclusion. Someone did not answer. Someone disagreed. A payment was delayed. A plan changed. You made a mistake. Now notice what you added. They do not care. It is falling apart. There is never enough. Nothing works. I always ruin things. There is the old state, not in the event, in the conclusion. You may not be able to change the event tonight, but you can release the conclusion. That alone changes your relationship to it. Perhaps the best sentence is, I do not know what this means yet. There is humility in that. And space. You do not know what it means yet. Maybe it becomes important later. Maybe it becomes irrelevant. Maybe it redirects you. Maybe nothing comes of it at all. You do not need to decide before sleep. Let the future remain open. This is especially valuable because people often want to turn every obstacle into a positive sign. This must mean something better is coming. This must be clearing the way. This must be part of the bridge, perhaps. But if you must make every unpleasant thing positive immediately, you are still reacting from fear. You are afraid the event might be ordinary. You are afraid it might not have a grand explanation. Let it be ordinary. Ordinary life contains inconvenience. Ordinary life contains misunderstanding. Ordinary life contains delays. A fulfilled person can experience all of these. This is vital. The new state is not a world in which nothing ever goes wrong. It is a self that no longer interprets every wrong thing as exile. A person who feels secure can still have an unexpected expense. A person who feels loved can still have an awkward conversation. A person who feels successful can still receive criticism. A person who feels worthy can still be refused. These events do not automatically eject them from the state. Why? Because identity is deeper than circumstance. Let that become natural. Identity deeper than circumstance. The old state was shallow because every wave changed it. One small event, and you became someone else. The new state becomes deeper. The surface may move, the depth remains. Imagine the sea. Wind can disturb the top. Below, there is stillness. You do not need the whole sea to be without movement before you call it deep. In the same way, you do not need every circumstance to be favorable before your state can be stable. Let the surface have weather. You remain deeper. This is a much more habitable understanding of manifestation. You are not trying to construct a life in which every event proves you right. That would make you more dependent upon evidence, not less. You are becoming someone who does not need every event to agree immediately. That is strength. So when the old self says, "There, I knew it," ask, "What exactly do I know?" Perhaps very little. You know something happened. That is all. Do not pretend certainty about what it predicts. The old self loves prediction because prediction lets it recreate the past. You can deny it that pleasure. This happened. Period. No prophecy. No lifelong conclusion. No sentence against yourself. And if the mind keeps returning to the event, let it return without giving it a larger role. You may think of it. You may dislike it. You may wish it were different. But you do not need to crown it. The event is not king. It does not rule the state. This is how you stop handing authority to appearances. Not by ignoring them. By reducing them to their proper size. A page. A moment. A fact. Not the book. Not the identity. Not the ending. Perhaps tonight you can take the most troubling event of the day and make it smaller. Not erase it. Smaller. From proof to event. From verdict to information. From this always happens to this happened. Feel how much weight falls away. The body may notice before the mind does. The shoulders may soften. The stomach may release. Why? Because prophecy is heavier than fact. Fact belongs to one moment. Prophecy carries the whole future. Stop carrying futures invented from one moment. You do not need them in bed. Let tomorrow remain unwritten. Let next week remain unwritten. Let the outcome remain unwritten. You have already chosen a state inwardly. That is enough for tonight. And if the event truly requires action later, action will be clearer when it is not surrounded by panic. You can respond tomorrow without becoming the event tonight. That is a fine distinction. Respond without becoming. Handle without identifying. See without worshipping. Feel without prophesying. This is the maturity I want you to take into sleep. No denial. No superstition. No frantic search for hidden meaning. Just a quieter relationship with circumstances. The world may show you something you do not prefer. You do not have to bow. You do not have to call it wonderful. You do not have to call it terrible forever. You may simply let it pass through the day as one event among many. And one event cannot tell the whole truth of who you are. Perhaps the old self still says, "But this looks bad." Maybe it does. You do not need to argue. Looking bad is not the same as being final. The old self says, "This is the opposite of what I wanted." Perhaps still not final. The old self says, "What if it means everything is going wrong?" You do not know. Leave it unanswered. That is enough. The book is still open. Do not write the last page in the dark, simply because one page disappointed you. There is more unwritten than written. Let that be spacious, not hopeful in a forced way. Simply open. And now let the event become farther away. It happened. It is not happening here. This bed is not the office. This room is not the conversation. This pillow is not the bill. The person is not standing before you now. The door is not closing now. The page is not being written now. You are here. And here, you do not need a verdict. Let the old sentence fade. There. I knew it. No. You knew one moment. That is all. One moment. One page. One event. Nothing more. Do not make one page the ending of a book still being written. Let the page turn. And for tonight, leave the rest unwritten. There is another temptation I want you to release tonight. It is the temptation to interpret every movement in your life as though you must know exactly what role it plays. You imagine the end, you assume the state, then something happens. A conversation, a delay, an unexpected meeting, a change of plan, a door closes, another opens, and immediately the mind asks, was that part of it? Was that delay necessary? Was meeting this person a sign? Is this the bridge? Perhaps, perhaps not. You do not need to know. A bridge is meant to be crossed, not inspected stone by stone while you are standing upon it. If you spend the whole journey bending down to examine every stone, you may forget that the purpose of the bridge is to carry you somewhere. This is what many do inwardly. They become so fascinated with the means that they lose the simplicity of the end. They say they trust the destination, but every day they ask the road to explain itself. Why this person? Why this delay? Why that conversation? Why now? Why not yesterday? What does this mean? Where is this leading? And the mind becomes busy again. But you do not need to know the architecture of fulfillment while it is unfolding. You do not need a map of every incident. You do not need to recognize every turning point as it happens. Some things make sense only afterward. Think of a journey by train. You sit by the window. There are towns you recognize, and fields you do not. There are stations where the train stops. There are stretches where nothing seems to happen. You do not run to the conductor after every mile and ask, was that tree necessary? Was that station part of the journey? Was that delay meant to happen? The journey is still the journey. Your constant interpretation does not move the train. Let life have some movement that does not require commentary. This is especially important if you have become accustomed to searching for signs. You may begin to believe that every unusual event must be interpreted. Someone says a phrase that reminds you of your desire. You think, this must mean it is close. Perhaps someone you have not seen in years appears. You think, this must be the bridge. Perhaps a plan changes unexpectedly. You think, this must be rearrangement. Perhaps. But perhaps it is simply life. You do not lose anything by allowing it to remain ordinary. In fact, you may gain peace, because once everything becomes a sign, you are never resting. You are decoding. You are observing. You are comparing. You are waiting for the next clue. And this is still a form of dependence upon the outer world. You say, I am living from the end. But then you ask every passing event to reassure you that the end is approaching. That is not quite rest. It is surveillance. Let the surveillance end. The bridge does not need your interpretation. It does not need your approval either. If something truly belongs to the unfolding of your life, it does not become more useful because you labeled it correctly. If a conversation is part of the movement toward fulfillment, it will serve its function whether you recognize it or not. If a delay redirects you, the redirection does not require you to understand it in the moment. If meeting a person changes something important, the change can occur without you announcing, this is the bridge. You are allowed to live before you understand. That sentence may be useful tonight. You are allowed to live before you understand. The old self wants understanding first. It says, tell me what this means, then I will trust. Show me the pattern, then I will relax. Explain the delay, then I will stop worrying. But life often refuses to give explanations on demand, and perhaps that is fortunate. If you had to understand every step before taking it, you would move very slowly. There are moments when the next step appears ordinary. A letter written, a visit made, a conversation accepted, a change of route, a practical decision. And later, looking back, you see that one ordinary act connected two worlds. But while living it, perhaps it felt like nothing. That is the beauty of the bridge. It often looks like life, not like a mystical procession, not like a trumpet announcing destiny. Life, ordinary movement. That is why I want you to stop demanding that every meaningful event look meaningful while it is happening. A bridge can be crossed in plain clothes. The person who helps you may not know they are helping you. The conversation that matters may begin with something trivial. The opportunity may arrive looking inconvenient. The delay may mean nothing at all. You do not know. And you do not need to know tonight. The mind becomes exhausted when it believes it must interpret everything correctly. It turns life into a puzzle that cannot be put down. You go to bed and replay the day. Why did they say that? Was I supposed to notice something? Did I miss a sign? Did I take the wrong step? No. Let the day remain imperfectly understood. You are not required to solve it before sleep. There is humility in saying, I do not know what this was, and then resting. Perhaps tomorrow it remains meaningless. Fine. Perhaps months later you understand. Fine. Perhaps you never understand. Also fine. Not every event needs retrospective importance. Some things are simply part of the texture of life. A rainy afternoon, a postponed meeting, a stranger's remark, a changed plan. You do not need to weave every thread into prophecy. This is what makes the teaching more peaceful. You do not have to become a detective of your own manifestation. You do not have to collect clues. You do not have to keep a record. You do not have to say, this must be step 3. This must be the turning point. This person must be the one. No. You can simply respond naturally to what is before you. That is enough. When the bridge is truly being crossed, much of it may feel completely ordinary. You may answer a letter because answering it seems natural. You may go somewhere because you were invited. You may speak to someone because the conversation arises. You may decline something because it no longer feels right. None of these actions need to be theatrical. The old self wants to know whether each one is aligned. The new state can act more simply. It asks, what is natural from who I am now? That is a better question. Not, what action will force the manifestation? Not, what does this event mean? Simply, what is natural from the state I occupy? Then act when action is called for. Rest when no action is called for. This keeps you out of manipulation, because once you believe every event is part of a coded path, you may start forcing meaning into things that do not need it. You may pursue a person because you have decided they are part of the bridge. You may remain in an unpleasant situation because you think it must be necessary. You may ignore common sense because you are searching for a spiritual explanation. Do not do that. A bridge of incidents does not require foolishness. It does not require passivity. It does not ask you to abandon judgment. You can still say no. You can still leave what is harmful. You can still make practical decisions. You can still correct a mistake. You can still ask a question. You can still change direction. The state is not a command to become passive before life. It is a way of meeting life without making the means your obsession. That distinction matters. Suppose you desire work. You have assumed yourself established. Then an invitation comes from somewhere unexpected. You do not need to know whether it is the bridge. Consider it honestly. Respond naturally. Perhaps it leads somewhere. Perhaps it does not. Your state does not collapse either way. Suppose you desire harmony in a relationship. A difficult conversation occurs. Do not immediately say, this must be clearing something. Maybe, but perhaps it is simply a difficult conversation that needs honesty. Have the conversation. Do not turn it into a mystical event. Suppose a financial opportunity appears. Do not abandon good judgment merely because you want it to be a sign. Examine it. Be sensible. The bridge is not made stronger by your credulity. This is important. Faith in imagination does not require stupidity in action. You are still a person living in the world, making decisions. The difference is that you no longer make decisions from panic. You no longer demand that each action prove the desired end. You allow action to be action, and the end remains inwardly chosen. That is much steadier. Sometimes what you call a bridge may even include something you would not have chosen consciously. A cancelled appointment, a change of schedule, a conversation that alters your plan. But again, do not rush to call every frustration necessary. You do not know that. Let events reveal their place, if they have one, in their own time. The need to interpret immediately comes from impatience. Impatience says, I must know that I am still on the path. But if the end is accepted inwardly, the path does not require constant confirmation. You can become less fascinated with path and more settled in destination. This is what I mean by living from the end. You do not stand in the middle of the bridge, asking every stone whether it leads to the far bank. You accepted the far bank already. Now walk, or rest, or sleep, whatever is natural. Perhaps this evening you are lying here thinking about something that happened today. You are wondering whether it was significant. Let me relieve you of the burden. You may not know, and you do not need to decide. Let the event loosen. Take the label off it. Not a sign, not a warning, not a breakthrough, not a setback, just an event. Feel how much quieter the mind becomes when you remove labels. A conversation, a delay, a meeting, a letter, a change. Nothing more for now. If it matters later, later will reveal that. You do not need to drag tomorrow's understanding into tonight. Let tonight be free of interpretation. This is particularly useful because interpretation can become another form of control. You think, if I understand the bridge, I can manage it. No. The whole point is that the means often include movements you could not consciously design. If you insist on managing every step, you reduce the field to what your present mind already knows. Why should the present mind know the whole path? It knows the desire. It knows the state you choose. That is enough. The means may include things outside your present calculation. So stop trying to write the middle. You have chosen the end. Let the middle breathe. I do not mean some external power is arranging every detail according to a secret script you must decode. I mean something simpler. Once you change the state you live from, your perception changes. Your choices may change. Your conversations may change. What you notice may change. What you accept may change. What you refuse may change. Other people may respond differently. Circumstances may unfold through ordinary chains of cause and response. You do not need to stand over this process with a magnifying glass. Let the new state have consequences you do not predict. That is enough. A man who feels worthy may finally answer an opportunity he once would have ignored. A woman who feels loved may speak with less fear and thereby change the tone of a relationship. A person who feels supplied may make a practical decision without panic and see possibilities that fear once hid. None of this requires mystical interpretation. It is simply the state becoming behavior, perception, and life. And sometimes the sequence looks surprising only because you could not see it from the old state. That is all. Let the mystery remain ordinary. This will help you sleep. You do not need to ask, what stage am I in? There are no stages you must identify. You do not need to ask, is the bridge close? You are not measuring distance. You do not need to ask, did I miss something? If a practical opportunity truly needs your attention, you can attend to it when it appears. You do not need constant vigilance. Life does not require you to stay awake all night so that fulfillment can find you. Rest, that is part of trust. The bridge does not disappear because you sleep. The world does not stop because you stop analyzing it. People continue living. Circumstances continue moving. Tomorrow will come, and you can meet it without having interpreted every detail of today. There is a great peace in this. Perhaps the old mind says, but if I do not watch, I may miss the sign. What sign? You are not waiting for signs. You are living from a state. If something useful appears, you can recognize usefulness without turning it into prophecy. If someone offers help, receive it if appropriate. If an idea comes, consider it. If nothing comes, rest. Simple. You do not need to spiritualize common sense, and you do not need to make common sense your enemy. The bridge, if you wish to use that phrase, can include perfectly ordinary decisions. A letter sent, a call made, a meeting attended, a train taken, a conversation declined, a book opened, a thought entertained, a habit dropped, a room entered. Nothing dramatic. This is why I tell you not to inspect the bridge stone by stone. If you do, you may become more interested in the stones than in walking. And obsession with the bridge is still obsession with not yet being at the end. Let that become clear. When you constantly ask, is this part of it? You are still psychologically saying, I am trying to get there. But the state of the end says, I am already there inwardly. From that position, the bridge becomes secondary. You live, the rest unfolds. Perhaps not exactly as you imagined. Perhaps through a route you never considered. Perhaps with changes along the way. That is all right. You were never required to predict the means, only to know the quality of the state you wish to inhabit. Let the means remain flexible. This protects you from becoming attached to one route. You may think fulfillment must come through one person, one employer, one amount, one conversation, one date, one plan, but often what you truly desire is larger than the route you selected. Security, love, recognition, freedom, belonging, supply. Let the state be primary. Let the route be secondary. Then you can recognize good without demanding that it wear the costume you expected. This is where interpretation can become limiting. You decide too quickly what something must mean, and then you become blind to other possibilities. Better to remain open, not vague, open. You know the end. You do not know every step. That is enough. And tonight, the steps do not matter. The body is lying here. No bridge needs to be crossed consciously in this moment. No stone needs inspection. No map needs drawing. You can stop walking for the night. The road may remain. The destination may remain. But you are allowed to rest between them. And perhaps when you stop examining every movement, you will begin to notice how much of your exhaustion came not from the journey, but from commentary about the journey. What does this mean? Where is this going? Why did that happen? What comes next? Enough. Let some questions remain unanswered. Let some incidents remain unnamed. Let some events pass without becoming symbols. You do not need to turn life into a language only you can decode. Life can simply be lived. This is a much calmer state. A conversation is a conversation until it becomes more. A meeting is a meeting until it becomes more. A delay is a delay until it becomes more. A change is a change. You do not need to know the whole chain tonight. Perhaps later you will look back and laugh at how ordinary the turning point seemed. Perhaps you will say, I had no idea that mattered. That is fine. You were not supposed to know everything while living it. You were supposed to live it. And now, you are supposed to sleep. So let the bridge disappear from your attention. No inspection, no analysis, no interpretation. If there are stones beneath your feet, let them remain beneath your feet. You do not need to count them. If there is movement beyond what you can see, let it remain unseen. If there is no movement you can detect, let that remain true too. No conclusion. You have chosen the state. That is enough. Perhaps this very night, the most faithful thing you can do is refuse to ask where you are on the road. No mile markers, no progress reports, no signs, no decoding, just rest. A bridge is meant to be crossed, not inspected stone by stone while you are standing upon it. And tonight, you do not even have to cross it. You can simply stop looking down. Let the road be the road. Let the end remain yours inwardly. Let life move without commentary. And let yourself become quiet enough to sleep. There is another habit I want you to release before the night grows any deeper. It is the habit of asking the world to wink at you. A number appears twice. A phrase is overheard. A song reminds you of the desire. Someone mentions a place, a name, an idea. And immediately the mind says, this must mean something. Perhaps it does. Perhaps it does not. But I tell you, you do not need a sign when you have an assumption. If a sign must convince you, then the sign has become your cause. And once again, you have placed authority outside yourself. You say you have imagined the end, but then you ask the outer world to certify it. You say you have accepted the state, but then you wait for some little signal to tell you whether you are allowed to trust it. That is not freedom. That is permission seeking. And tonight, you do not need permission. A sign may be pleasant. A coincidence may amuse you. A sentence spoken by another may feel strangely timely. Enjoy it if you wish. but do not bow to it. Do not make it the reason you believe, because the moment the sign becomes necessary, its absence becomes frightening. Then you begin to watch. You begin to search. You begin to interpret. You begin to say, I have not seen anything lately. Has something gone wrong? Do you see the trap? The sign that once comforted you becomes another thing you must receive. Now you have two desires, the original desire and the desire for proof that the original desire is approaching. Then perhaps a third desire appears, proof that the proof was genuine. This is how the mind becomes busy again. Tonight, let it become simpler. You assumed, enough. You imagined, enough. You accepted, even for a moment, the feeling of the fulfilled state, enough. The world does not need to salute you before you sleep. You do not need it to arrange some little performance so that you may feel safe. No repeating numbers, no mysterious phrase, no overheard sentence, no perfectly timed coincidence, no dream that must be decoded, no stranger saying exactly what you hope to hear. Nothing is required. This is not because such things cannot occur. They can. Life is full of coincidences. Life is full of strange meetings. Life is full of moments that appear meaningful. But meaning is not the same thing as authority. You may notice a sign without becoming dependent upon it. That distinction is important. Suppose you see something that reminds you of your desire. The old mind becomes excited. This is it. Then the next day nothing similar happens. Immediately. Why did the sign stop? You were not strengthened. You were stimulated. There is a difference. Stimulation rises and falls. Assumption can remain quiet. This is why I prefer the quiet state. A quiet state does not need constant entertainment. It does not need life to keep producing clues. It is not waiting for another coincidence. It rests, and rest is closer to possession. The person who has what they need does not ask every passing object to reassure them. Imagine someone living securely in their own home. They do not need to see the house number 10 times a day to remember where they live. They do not say, I saw the number again. This must mean the house is still mine. No. They know where they live. Possession is quieter than signs. Perhaps you desire love. You hear a romantic song. The old self says, this must mean love is coming. Maybe. But what if no such song is heard tomorrow? Does love disappear? Of course not. Then do not make the song stronger than the state. Perhaps you desire work. Someone speaks of an opportunity. You think, this must be it. Perhaps it is. Perhaps it is simply a conversation. You do not need to decide. If the opportunity is useful, consider it. If not, let it pass. Do not make every mention into prophecy. Perhaps you desire money. You find a coin. You hear someone speaking of abundance. You receive an unexpected small sum. These may please you. Good. Receive them. But do not say, now I know. Know from where? From the coin, from the other person, from the small sum. If your inner certainty depends upon the outer token, then the token has become the cause. Return the cause inward. This is the whole movement. Return the cause inward. You do not need to reject signs. You simply refuse to worship them. There is a difference. You can smile at a coincidence and continue. You can appreciate a timely conversation and continue. You can enjoy a moment of correspondence between inner and outer and continue. No investigation, no notebook, no counting, no searching for the next one. Let the moment pass. If it was meaningful, its meaning does not need to be defended. If it was meaningless, nothing has been lost. This is a much calmer way to live. The old state wants confirmation every day. The new state begins to need less. That is why the absence of signs can actually reveal something useful about you. Not because their absence is itself a sign, but because you discover you can remain inwardly settled without them. That is freedom. You may go a whole week without anything unusual happening. Can you let the week be ordinary? Can you still sleep? Can you still live from the end without asking the world to decorate your path? That is deeper than excitement. There is a great temptation to make manifestation into a trail of clues. People begin collecting evidence everywhere. They hear one phrase and say, this is confirmation. Then another and say, this is alignment. then a delay and say, this must be divine timing, then an inconvenience and say, this must be clearing. Soon nothing is allowed to be ordinary. Everything must serve the story. But life does not need to become a coded message in order for your inner state to matter. Let ordinary life remain ordinary. That is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself tonight. A sound outside is a sound. A clock is a clock. A number is a number. A song is a song. A dream is a dream. A conversation is a conversation. If something more is revealed later, fine. But you do not need to assign significance in advance. This will quiet the mind enormously. Because interpretation is work. You may not realize how much energy you spend asking, what does this mean? Why did I see that? Why did they say that now? Is this connected? Is this a sign? Let the questions go unanswered. Perhaps nothing means anything tonight. Can you tolerate that? Perhaps this is simply a night, a bed, a room, a body becoming tired. No cosmic telegram, no secret signal, no hidden announcement. And still, you may rest in the state you chose. That is enough. You do not need the world to confirm that imagination has value. You do not need the outer world to applaud the inner act. The whole point of assumption is that you accept inwardly before evidence appears. If evidence is required first, then you are not assuming, you are reacting. There is a difference. Reaction says, I believe because I saw. Assumption says, I accept inwardly, and I do not need to force the world to reassure me tonight. This does not mean blindness. You still see facts. You still notice circumstances. But you do not demand that they become witnesses for your faith. That is much more stable. Suppose tomorrow brings something encouraging. Wonderful. Enjoy it. But do not say, now I can believe. You could believe before. Suppose tomorrow brings nothing unusual. Fine. Do not say, now I must doubt. You do not need to. The outer world is not your instructor in identity. It does not get to tell you when to feel secure. It does not get to tell you when to feel loved. It does not get to tell you when to feel supplied. It does not get to tell you when to feel established. You choose the state. Then let the world be the world. This is where many people unconsciously give away their authority. They begin in imagination, but they end in observation. They say, I have assumed. Then they spend the day asking, where is the proof? That is not terrible. It is simply the old habit returning. Notice it, then withdraw the question. No proof needed now. Perhaps one of the most powerful things you can say tonight is, I do not need a sign. Not as a challenge, not as pride, just as release. I do not need a sign. You may repeat it once, then let it go. Do not turn it into another mantra. The meaning matters more than repetition. I do not need a sign, because the sign does not create the state. The state is chosen within. And perhaps the state itself becomes quieter when it no longer has to perform for you. You may discover that what you called faith before was partly excitement, and excitement wanted reinforcement. The new state may be less emotional, less dramatic, more settled. You may think, nothing special is happening. Exactly. That may be closer to naturalness. When something belongs to you, you do not need it to feel special every hour. A wedding day is special. Marriage becomes daily life. Receiving the key is special. Living in the home becomes ordinary. Getting the position is special. Doing the work becomes Tuesday afternoon. The fulfilled state has a way of becoming boring. And this is good. Signs keep the desire exciting. Naturalness makes it livable. Which do you want? To be constantly excited that the thing might be coming, or to become someone for whom the thing belongs? The second is quieter, much quieter. That is where we are going tonight. You do not need the world to wink at you. You do not need a little coincidence to say, you are on the right road. You have already chosen the road inwardly. And even if the road bends, you do not need a marker at every turn. Let some distance be traveled without reassurance. There is dignity in that. Perhaps you are accustomed to asking for signs from another person. You watch their tone, their letters, their expressions, their choice of words. You search for evidence that they feel differently. This can become exhausting. Let them be human tonight. Do not turn their every gesture into a signal about your future. A person may be warm today and tired tomorrow, quiet in the morning and talkative in the evening. None of this needs to become prophecy. You are not reading tea leaves. You are living. Let human behavior remain human. Perhaps you are accustomed to asking for financial signs. A small gain appears. You become hopeful. Then an expense appears. You become afraid. Up, down, up, down. The outer world becomes a lever, moving your state. Stop. The amount may change. Let the state become steadier. You do not need every movement to encourage you, and you do not need every contrary movement to discourage you. This is what inner authority looks like, not domination, stability. Perhaps you are accustomed to interpreting dreams. You wake and ask, what did it mean? Perhaps it meant something. Perhaps it was simply a dream. Do not allow the dream to become more powerful than the assumption. If it encourages you, fine. If it disturbs you, do not turn it into a sentence against yourself. You were sleeping. The mind produced images. That is all you know with certainty. Leave room for not knowing. You do not need to decode your way into fulfillment. This is another kind of rest. No decoding. No reading between lines. No hunting for clues. No asking the outer world to reassure the inner world. Let the direction reverse. Inner first, outer second. Not inner because outer agrees. Inner because you choose the state. That is the principle. And perhaps you now understand why dependence on signs can become dangerous psychologically. Not because signs are forbidden, because dependence on them keeps you asking permission. You remain the one waiting for evidence. You remain the one who says, tell me I may believe. But who are you asking? A number? A song? A stranger? A coincidence? Why should any of these have authority over your concept of self? Return the authority to where it belongs, within. I tell you, when you truly begin to occupy the state, signs lose some of their fascination. You may still notice them, but they no longer feel necessary. You smile, then continue. There is no rush to tell someone, no need to record it, no need to say, this proves it. Proof is becoming less important. That itself is a quieter form of strength. You are less easily persuaded because you are less easily dissuaded. That is an important balance. If one coincidence can convince you, one contrary event can also frighten you. If you make yourself highly suggestible to every outer sign, you make yourself equally vulnerable to every outer contradiction. Better to become less reactive to both. Good event? Fine. Difficult event? Fine. Neither one gets to define the whole state. That is stability. Tonight, perhaps you can imagine placing all signs outside the room. Not literally, just mentally. The numbers, the phrases, the coincidences, the dreams, the gestures, the little things you have been collecting. Place them down. You do not need to throw them away. Just stop holding them. Let them sit somewhere else. Then ask, without any sign at all, what do I choose to assume? That is the real question. Without any sign, without encouragement, without discouragement, without evidence. What state do you choose? Perhaps I am secure. Perhaps I am loved. Perhaps I am supplied. Perhaps I belong. Perhaps the matter is settled. Choose one. Then let even the words become quiet. You do not need to keep saying them. The state does not become more real because the mouth of the mind never closes. Let silence carry it. You are no longer collecting. No more clues. No more proof. No more hidden messages. No more asking, is this it? You do not need it to appear tonight. You need rest. And rest becomes easier when the world is no longer required to communicate with you. Let the world become silent. Let it stop sending. Let it stop explaining. Let it stop proving. Nothing needs to arrive before sleep. No letter, no phrase, no number, no sign. And if something appears tomorrow, let it appear. You can enjoy it without making it your foundation. The foundation is deeper. Your chosen assumption, your inner position, your concept of self. That is where you return, not to the sign, to the state. This is why the first sign of maturity may be that signs become less interesting. You are not hostile to them. You simply no longer need them. Like a child who once needed a lamp in the hallway, and one day discovers the darkness no longer frightens him. The hallway did not change. His relation to it did. So too with uncertainty. You may discover that you no longer need little lights along the path. You can rest without knowing exactly where everything is. The road can remain dim. The end can remain inwardly clear. That is enough. If a sign must convince you, then the sign has become your cause. Take the cause back, quietly. No declaration to the world, no announcement. Just stop asking it to convince you. You do not need the world to wink at you tonight. You do not need it to whisper, yes, keep going. You do not need it to say, you are close. You do not need it to promise anything. Let the world sleep outside your attention. Let the signs become silent. Let the search become silent. Let the need for reassurance become silent. You have already chosen where to rest inwardly. That is enough. No sign required. No signal required. No proof required. Only the assumption. And now even that can become quiet. You have imagined enough for tonight. You have asked enough. You have checked enough. You do not have to strengthen what is yours by worrying about it. Let certainty become quieter than effort. Let the manifestation remain where you planted it. No need to look for movement. No need to listen for an answer. No need to inspect the bridge. No need to ask whether it is near. You have done enough for this night. Let that be true without qualification. Not enough because you forced yourself to believe perfectly. Not enough because every thought was pure. Not enough because you never doubted. Enough because there is nothing more you need to add before sleep. The seed does not need another command. The soil does not need another inspection. The night does not need another question. Let what has been planted remain planted. There is nothing beneath the surface that requires your supervision now. You can stop standing over the ground. You can stop wondering whether something is happening. You can stop imagining that your attention must remain fixed upon the desire, or else it will somehow lose its way. What is yours inwardly does not need to be kept awake. Let that become quiet. You do not need to keep it awake. You do not need to keep yourself awake. The old habit may still whisper that one more thought is necessary, one more scene, one more affirmation, one more correction, one more attempt to feel it. But tonight, no, nothing more. You are not abandoning anything. You are ceasing to disturb it. There is a difference, a great difference. To abandon is to withdraw from what you truly choose. To cease disturbing is to let it rest where it has already been placed. Let it rest. Let the imaginal act become less visible to you. Let the desire sink beneath conscious attention. Let the words fade. Let the pictures soften. Let the whole matter become less important for these remaining hours. You do not have to hold it in the front of the mind. Possession does not require staring. A man does not spend the night looking at his own front door to prove he has a home. He closes his eyes. A woman does not keep repeating the name of the person she loves to prove the relationship exists. She rests. A person who is supplied does not remain awake counting proof of supply. He sleeps. Let sleep become that simple. You are not trying to enter a special state now. You are allowing the state to become ordinary enough that sleep is permitted. There is no performance left, no audience, no examiner, no score to improve, no requirement that you feel transformed before the next breath. Perhaps you do not feel transformed at all. Fine. Perhaps the body is simply tired. Let it be tired. Perhaps the mind still has fragments of the day. Let them pass. Perhaps some old uncertainty remains. Let it remain at the edge. You do not have to resolve it. You do not have to chase it away. You do not have to turn uncertainty into certainty by force. You may simply stop feeding it. That is enough. The night grows quieter whether you help it or not. Let yourself become quieter with it. No need to search the darkness for movement. No need to ask what is rearranging. No need to imagine invisible steps. No need to know who is thinking what. No need to know what is opening. No need to know what is closing. No need to know what is becoming possible. You can sleep without a report. Let the unseen remain unseen. Let the unfinished remain unfinished. Let the unanswered remain unanswered. Nothing is demanding a conclusion from you now. The whole matter may remain incomplete in the outer world. and still be complete enough within for you to rest. That is all you need tonight. Rest. Perhaps the old mind says, but what if I stop thinking about it? Then stop thinking about it. Nothing is lost. Perhaps it says, but what if I forget the scene? Then forget the scene. The scene was never the treasure. The state was the treasure. And even the state does not need to be held tightly. Let it become background. Let it become so quiet that you no longer know whether you are maintaining it. You do not need to know. That question belongs to effort. Let effort go. There may come a point when you can no longer follow every word. Good. Do not return. Do not try to become more alert. Let the sentences pass without being collected. You do not need to remember them. You do not need to understand every one. You do not need to take anything from this night. Let the night take something from you instead. Let it take the checking. Let it take the strain. Let it take the habit of asking whether anything is happening. Let it take the need to restart. Let it take the fear that you have done something wrong. Let the night have all of that. You do not need it while you sleep. Perhaps you have carried the desire like a fragile glass, afraid that one wrong movement would break it. Set it down. Nothing to protect, nothing to guard, nothing to keep from falling. Let it be still. You may be surprised by how much energy has gone into guarding what you hope to receive. Watching your thoughts, watching the world, watching other people, watching the clock, watching yourself. Enough watching. The eyes can close. The world can remain unwatched. The manifestation can remain unwatched. The bridge can remain unwatched. The seed can remain unwatched. What is growing does not need your eyes upon it. Let the dark cover the field. You do not go outside at midnight to inspect the soil. You let the field have the night. Give your inner field the same permission. No digging, no lifting the earth, no asking whether the root has formed, no asking whether the first movement has begun. You cannot see beneath the soil. You do not need to. You cannot see the whole path. You do not need to. You cannot see the next chapter. You do not need to. Let not knowing become soft. No danger in not knowing. No failure in not knowing. Just night. Just rest. Just this moment in which nothing more is demanded. You have imagined enough for tonight. You have asked enough. You have checked enough. Let those words become slower now. Enough imagining. Enough asking. Enough checking. You do not have to strengthen what is yours by worrying about it. Worry is not devotion. Worry is not loyalty. Worry is not proof that you care. The desire does not need your tension to remain important. It can matter and still be quiet. It can matter and still let you sleep. Let it matter without being loud. Let certainty become quieter than effort. Perhaps certainty is not a feeling at all now. Perhaps it is simply the absence of another question. Nothing more to ask. No need to ask when. No need to ask how. No need to ask whether. No need to ask if. Let the questions become distant. The mind may still form them faintly. Let them dissolve before they finish. When will? No answer. How will? No answer. What if? No answer. You are not required to answer the night. The night is not questioning you. It is holding silence. Let silence be enough. No need to look for movement. No need to listen for an answer. No need to inspect the bridge. No need to ask whether it is near. Near and far are no longer useful now. You are not measuring distance in sleep. You are not walking a road consciously. You are not standing at a gate. You are simply resting. That is enough. Perhaps the body is heavier now. Let it be heavy. Perhaps the hands are still. Let them be still. Perhaps the jaw softens. Let it soften. Perhaps nothing changes physically. That is all right too. No need to perform relaxation. No need to breathe correctly. No need to create the perfect descent into sleep. Sleep knows how to come. Let it come in its own manner. You do not have to meet it halfway. You only need to stop resisting it with another question. The old self may still want to make one final inspection, one final look, one final thought. No. Let the old self grow bored. Let it find nothing to inspect, nothing to restart, nothing to repair, nothing to chase, nothing to prove. That is all. Nothing to restart. The seed has been planted. Nothing to repair. The imaginal act does not require perfection. Nothing to chase. The end is not running from you. Nothing to prove. No one is asking for proof. Let these become less like instructions and more like permission. Nothing to restart, nothing to repair, nothing to chase, nothing to prove. You may stop now. You may stop trying to improve the night. You may stop trying to make sleep productive. You may stop trying to turn every moment before sleep into an achievement. No achievement, no result to earn, no technique to complete. You are allowed to disappear into sleep without finishing anything. That is a beautiful freedom. Unfinished thoughts can remain unfinished. Unfinished plans can remain unfinished. Unfinished conversations can remain unfinished. Unfinished manifestations can remain unfinished to the eyes. Nothing has to become visible before you rest. Let it be planted. Let it be quiet. Let it be yours. Not yours because you are forcing certainty. Yours inwardly because you have chosen the state and no longer need to argue with it. Let it be planted. Let the soil cover it. Let darkness cover the soil. Let silence cover the night. Let the whole thing disappear from conscious view. You do not need to hold a lamp above the field. Turn the lamp down. Less light, less thought, less effort. Let it be quiet. If the mind brings the desire back, do not scold it. Let the desire pass gently through. No need to catch it. No need to strengthen it. No need to repeat anything. It can come and go like a familiar name heard from another room. You know it. You do not need to rise. Stay here. Rest. If the old fear comes, let it be farther away now. You do not need to go toward it. If the old doubt comes, let it remain unanswered. If the old habit says, check, do nothing, nothing. That may be the deepest movement now. Do nothing. Do not check. Do not correct. Do not restart. Let the moment pass. You are not neglecting the seed. You are leaving it alone. There is wisdom in leaving certain things alone. Let that wisdom become sleep. The desire may grow quieter. Good. The image may disappear. Good. The words may blur. Good. The whole subject may become difficult to remember. Good. You do not need to carry it consciously into sleep. Let sleep carry what you no longer need to hold. No checking. No waiting. No digging. Rest. The old self was always checking. Let it stop. The old self was always waiting. Let it stop. The old self was always digging. Let it stop. No checking. No waiting. No digging. Rest. There is nothing beneath the soil you need to see tonight. Nothing above the soil you need to demand tonight. Nothing in the distance you need to call closer. Nothing in the past you need to correct. Nothing in the future you need to prepare. This moment is enough. It is enough. Let that become very quiet. It is enough. You do not need another feeling. It is enough. You do not need another sign. It is enough. You do not need another scene. It is enough. You do not need another answer. It is enough. Perhaps the words are already becoming too much. Let them become fewer. Let the pauses become longer in you. Nothing to restart. Nothing to repair. Nothing to chase. Nothing to prove. Let it be planted. Let it be quiet. Let it be yours. No need to hold. No need to know. No need to watch. Rest. If the body wants to turn, let it turn. If the breath changes, let it change. If the mind wanders, let it wander. No need to bring it back perfectly. There is nowhere else you must be. You are already here. Rest. The field is dark. The seed is hidden. That is all right. You do not need to see the flower tonight. You do not need to imagine the flower tonight. You do not need to ask whether the flower is coming. Leave the field. Close the gate. Walk away inwardly. Not forever. Just for the night. The field knows the dark. Let it have the dark. You know sleep. Let yourself have sleep. No checking. No waiting. No digging. Rest. Perhaps even the word manifestation can disappear now. No need for it. No need for the name of the desire. No need for the image of the end. No need for the path. No need for the seed. Let the symbols go. Only rest. Quiet now. Nothing to prove. Nothing to reach. Nothing to maintain. Nothing to monitor. Quiet now. The old questions can become faint. The old urgency can become faint. The old need to know can become faint. Let it all become distant. No resistance. Just distance. Farther away. less important, less clear, less necessary. You do not need to decide anything now. You do not need to believe anything more now. You do not need to become anything more now. Nothing more. Rest. It is enough. Quiet now. No checking. No waiting. No digging. Let it be planted. Let it be quiet. Let it be yours. No need to touch it. No need to test it. No need to wake it. Let sleep take you. There is nothing left to do with the seed tonight. Nothing left to do with the bridge. Nothing left to do with the world. Nothing left to do with the desire. Nothing left to do with yourself. Rest. The night can finish what effort cannot. You do not have to help. You do not have to watch. You do not have to know. Quiet now. It is enough. Let the words fade. Let the field fade. Let the question fade. Let the desire become quiet. Let everything become quiet. No checking. No waiting. No digging. Rest. Quiet now. Nothing to restart. Nothing to repair. Nothing to chase. Nothing to prove. Rest. It is enough. Let sleep take you. Sleep.